The family kept $612,400 in orchard profits, and Claire got the house where the workers used to eat. Uncle Dean announced both facts in the same calm voice. He sat at the head of Ruth's dining table, beneath the brass chandelier she had hated, with a paper plate of funeral cookies beside his elbow. The reserve distribution comes to $204,000 and change for each branch, he said. Before taxes, obviously. Each branch meant Dean, Aunt Marlene, and Claire's mother, Susan. Claire apparently belonged to no branch at all. Dean turned one page, and the cottage parcel goes to Claire. House, outbuildings, and approximately 1.1 acres. Marlene let out a small, pleased breath. That's sweet. Claire looked at her. Sentimental, Marlene added. Your grandmother was sentimental. The cottage stood behind the equipment shed, half hidden by overgrown lilacs and a row of apple trees nobody sprayed anymore. Its roof sagged above the old kitchen where crews once ate lunch during harvest. Ruth had not been inside it in years. Susan's fingers closed around Claire's wrist under the table. Don't, the grip said. Claire had not decided what she might do. Cry, perhaps. Laugh at the absurdity. Ask why the three people receiving orchard money also needed the money Claire had helped the orchard save by caring for Ruth at home. Mostly, she wanted to know what her grandmother had meant every time she said, "You'll always have your place here." Because if the cottage was that place, Claire could not understand whether Ruth had loved her, punished her, or simply run out of valuable things. Dean slid the funeral cookies toward her. Almond. You ought to eat something. It was such an ordinary kindness that Claire almost hated him for it. I'm okay. You've said that since 7 this morning, Susan murmured, and it's gotten more convincing every time. Graham, Dean's son, looked down quickly, but not before Claire caught the beginning of a smile. He was 33, broad-shouldered, expensive in a way that never involved visible labels, and still capable of finding Claire funny when he forgot they were on opposite sides of something. Dean gave him a look. Graham rearranged his expression. The house was full of the remains of the funeral. Damp black coats hung from pegs by the mudroom. Somebody had abandoned a glass of iced tea on Ruth's piano. The dining room smelled of lilies, coffee, and the ham Marlene had insisted on serving, even though Ruth had once described funeral ham as meat-wearing grief makeup. Claire could hear Ruth saying it. She could see the way her mouth had pinched afterward, pleased with herself. The empty chair near the window seemed more real than anyone sitting at the table. Marlene gathered the pages into a neat stack. She had cried harder than anyone at the church, and now wore Ruth's gold scarf knotted at her throat. She kept touching it, as if checking that it had not disappeared. The farmhouse and event barn transferred directly to me, she said, mostly to Susan. But Dean and I will continue the current operating arrangement. Nothing changes day to day. Something had already changed day to day. Ruth was dead. Claire no longer needed to wake at 2 in the morning because a floorboard creaked. She no longer had to crush pills into applesauce or pretend not to notice when Ruth called her by her father's name. She also no longer had a bedroom. The room upstairs where Claire had slept for almost 3 years belonged to Marlene now, along with every window, drawer pull, and loose tread. Claire's suitcase waited on the landing because packing it before the funeral had felt heartless, and leaving it unpacked had begun to feel stupid. Susan finally released her wrist. Half moon marks remained in Claire's skin. There's cash for me separately, Susan said, as if Claire might have misunderstood the arithmetic. From the investment account. The orchard distribution is a business decision. Of course. Don't say it like that. Like what? Like you're agreeing with me using a knife. Dean rubbed the bridge of his nose. He had Ruth's hands, wide palms, square nails, a pale scar across the left thumb. Claire remembered those hands lifting her onto a tractor when she was small, though Dean would probably deny doing anything so unsafe. The reserve has accumulated for years, he said. It's not inheritance in the traditional sense. Marlene, Susan, and I deferred compensation while we built the business. Claire looked toward the window. Beyond the wet glass, rows of bare trees descended the hill in precise brown lines. February made the orchard look honest. No leaves, no blossoms, no basket stacked for photographs. Just wire, mud, and work. Grandma deferred compensation too, Claire said. The room went still. Marlene's tissue made a dry whisper in her lap. Mother owned the company. I know. Then what exactly are you saying? Claire had not planned the sentence. She had promised herself in the church bathroom that she would make it through one day without becoming the difficult person everyone already expected. I'm saying she stopped taking money out after Dad died because she said the orchard needed it. That was 20 years ago, Dean said, and I stopped working to come take care of her. Susan's face changed first. Not anger, fear of anger, which was somehow worse. We all took care of her. Claire looked at her mother. Susan glanced toward the piano, in different ways. Marlene leaned forward. You lived here without paying rent. There it was, placed gently on the table between the cold coffee and the almond cookies. Claire nodded once. That's true. And Mother paid for groceries. That's true too. You're acting as though nobody appreciates what you did. I'm not acting. Graham pushed his chair back an inch. Maybe today isn't the day to audit everybody's grief. Dean's gaze moved to him. Nobody is auditing grief. That would be a terrible spreadsheet, Graham said. No one laughed this time. Claire stood. The movement made Susan reach for her again, but Claire picked up her coffee before her mother could catch her. I'd like to see the cottage. Dean blinked. Now? It belongs to me now, right? Well, technically, once everything records. Dean, Marlene warned. What? I'm saying yes. He rose with the faint grunt he made after long hours on a tractor, though he had not driven one regularly in years. For a moment, Claire thought he meant to take her there. Instead, he crossed to the sideboard and opened the top drawer. I've got keys someplace. The green tag, Graham said. Bottom drawer. Dean frowned at him. Why do you know that? I changed the padlock last fall. The door has a padlock? Susan asked. Storage, Marlene said. Old folding chairs. Those awful galvanized tubs. Dean found the keys and held them out. A faded green plastic tag hung from the ring, curled at one corner by age. Someone had written cottage in black marker and then traced the word again when it faded. Claire closed her hand around it. I'll come with you, Susan said. No. Finish your coffee. Claire, please. That stopped her mother more effectively than anger would have. The mud sucked at Claire's funeral shoes as she crossed the yard. A cold mist floated between the buildings, too fine to call rain and too persistent to ignore. She passed the packing house, silent for winter, and the equipment shed with its blue sliding doors. The orchard road bent toward the workers' cottage. From a distance, it looked smaller than she remembered. The porch listed to the right. One gutter had detached and hung like a loose ribbon. Lilac branches scraped the gray siding. The 4 old apple trees beyond the house were thick with crossing limbs and black knots. Ruth used to call them stubborn old ladies. Dean called them wasted ground. Claire fitted the key into the padlock. It stuck halfway. Lift the door first. Graham stood 10 yards behind her, holding an umbrella he had apparently forgotten to open. I asked to go alone. You asked your mother. I meant it broadly. He came up the steps, polished shoes slipping once. Claire pretended not to see. You have to pull the handle up, he said. Frame swells. She lifted. The key turned. The door opened 3 inches and struck something inside. Folding chairs, Graham said. Your expertise is dazzling. Together, they shoved until the chairs scraped aside. The smell arrived before the room came into view. Damp plaster, mouse droppings, old grease, and the cold mineral scent of a house that had forgotten people. Graham finally opened the umbrella, realized it was useless under the porch roof, and closed it again. Wow, he said. The kitchen ran across the back of the cottage. A long wooden table occupied the center, buried beneath boxes of canning jars and 2 dented stock pots. The enamel stove had rust around every burner. Water stains spread across the ceiling in overlapping brown circles. Claire crossed the threshold. Her heel crunched something. A dead beetle, she hoped. Cabinet doors sagged open. A calendar from 11 years earlier still hung beside the pantry, turned to September. Someone had circled Pick Gala in red and drawn an angry face beside the 23rd. The room came back to her in pieces. Alma slapping flour from her hands. Thomas hunched over a bowl of stew. Reggie telling a story so slowly that everybody groaned before the punchline arrived. Ruth at the stove, younger and stronger, complaining that hungry people became fools if you let them wait. Claire touched the table. Beneath the dust were grooves, initials, knife marks, and a dark ring from a pot set down too hot. I thought Marlene cleaned this out, Graham said. Marlene thinks putting things in boxes counts as cleaning. That trait is genetic. Then you should get tested. He smiled, but it did not last. The roof's worse than I thought. Claire looked up. You changed the padlock but didn't notice the roof? I noticed it. It wasn't my call. Whose call was it? You know whose? Dean's name stayed between them without being spoken. Graham walked to the front room and pushed open a curtain. Weak gray light showed a couch with its cushions removed and a fireplace blocked by a sheet of plywood. You can't stay here, he said. I didn't ask. I mean, physically. There's probably mold. The wiring's old. I don't know if the well line is even on. It's a house, Graham, not a lunar module. A house can kill you more creatively. She opened the tap. It coughed once, spat brown water, then fell silent. Graham exhaled through his nose. See? Claire set her purse on the table, as if that settled something. He watched her. Dad's going to make you an offer. For what? The parcel. She turned. He didn't tell me to say anything, Graham added. Marlene wants to extend the event lawn eventually. Parking too. The cottage sits in an awkward spot. For weddings, for the business. My inheritance is inconveniently located near Aunt Marlene's inheritance. That's one way to put it. What's the other? Graham looked around the ruined kitchen. That you could take the money and start over somewhere that doesn't leak. Claire wanted to ask how much, but the question felt like reaching for a price tag tied around her own throat. Instead, she said, Grandma left it to me. I'm aware. Did you know she was going to? No. The answer came too quickly to be rehearsed. Did Dean? I don't think so. Outside, the mist sharpened into rain. It ticked against the windows and found the bad places in the roof. A drop struck the table, then another. Graham moved a stock pot beneath it. The gesture was so familiar, so practical, that for one dangerous second, Claire nearly cried. He put his hands in his coat pockets. I'm sorry about Ruth. You mean Grandma? His jaw tightened. That's what I meant? No, it isn't. He stared toward the pantry calendar. She stopped calling me Graham near the end. I was Dean every time. Then she'd get mad because I hadn't fixed something she asked Dad to fix in 1998. Claire softened despite herself. She called me Daniel twice last week. Her father's name changed the air. Graham nodded. Bet you love that. She apologized afterward. That sounds like her. No, it didn't. Rainwater tapped steadily into the pot. Graham left first. He offered to carry her suitcase down from the farmhouse, and Claire said she would get it herself. He told her not to turn on the breaker until Reggie checked the wiring. She told him she understood electricity. He said, sure. Portland, in the same irritating tone he had used since she moved away at 19. By dusk, the family had gone home. Claire carried her suitcase through the rain and set it beside the long table. She found one working lamp, 3 candles, and a broom with half its bristles. The fireplace smoked. The tap remained dry. Her phone battery fell to 9%. She ate 2 funeral cookies for dinner. At 11, wind lifted the tarp she had dragged over the worst patch of roof. Water ran down the wall in a narrow, shining thread. Claire sat on the floor in Ruth's coat, listening to the house complain around her. Dean's offer arrived by text. $20,000, cash, no pressure. Think about it. Claire read it until the screen went black. Then headlights moved across the kitchen ceiling. Not one vehicle, 3. Doors opened outside. Voices carried through the rain. Someone laughed after stumbling in the mud, and another voice said, I told you to bring the good flashlight. Claire stood as 3 figures came up the porch steps, carrying tarps, lumber, and a steel thermos. Thomas knocked on the door of the cottage as though he expected someone to be home. Claire opened the door 3 inches, stopped it against the folding chairs, then put her shoulder into it. Thomas stared at her from beneath the dripping bill of his cap. You planning to make us climb through sideways? I wasn't planning on company. Move the chairs, Alma told him. You move them. I'm holding a roof. The rolled tarp on Thomas's shoulder was large enough to cover a boat. Reggie stood behind him with 2x4s tucked under one arm and the steel thermos under the other. Alma carried a red toolbox, a canvas grocery bag, and an expression suggesting Claire had done something personally offensive by getting wet. They pushed inside together, bringing rain, cold air, and the smell of damp wool. How did you know I was here? Claire asked. Reggie set down the lumber. Graham called me about the breaker. So Graham sent you. Graham told me not to let you electrocute yourself. Nobody sent the rest of this. Alma handed Claire the grocery bag. Inside were 3 foil-wrapped tamales, 2 oranges, and a pair of thick gray socks. "I'm not hungry," Claire said. "Thomas said you'd say that." Thomas leaned the tarp against the stove. "I said she'd lie." Claire looked from one to the other. They had attended Ruth's funeral, but she had only seen them at a distance near the back of the church. Dean had shaken Thomas's hand outside. Marlene had promised Alma she would call about Ruth's clothes. Reggie had stood alone under a cedar tree, turning his work cap in his hands. "You didn't have to come out in this." "No," Alma said, "we didn't." The answer left no polite opening for an argument. Reggie pulled a flashlight from his jacket and aimed it at the ceiling. "Show me the panel." "It's in the pantry, I think." "You think?" "I've owned the place for about 9 hours. Plenty of time to learn where the fire starts." He disappeared into the pantry. Thomas began moving boxes away from the leak, assessing the room with small movements of his head. He was 60, perhaps a little older, though the orchard had made age difficult to read on him. His face was deeply lined, his shoulders still powerful, and 2 fingers on his left hand bent toward each other after an old ladder accident. Alma was shorter than Claire remembered. Without the packing line around her, the conveyor belts, rolling bins, shouted counts, she seemed almost delicate until she lifted one end of the long table by herself. "Put something under that leg," she told Thomas. He slid a folded piece of cardboard beneath it. "The other leg." "You said that leg." "I looked at you when I said it. That doesn't make a compass." Claire laughed before she could stop herself. Alma glanced at her. "Eat?" The tamales were still warm. Claire sat on a folding chair, while Thomas and Alma cleared space, and Reggie muttered from the pantry. She ate one without tasting it, then realized she was ravenous and ate a second too quickly. The thermos held coffee sweetened with cinnamon. Alma poured it into a plastic cup and pushed it toward her. "I can pay you for the tarp," Claire said. Thomas snorted. "I'm serious. So am I. I don't want Dean thinking I'm using orchard supplies. These aren't orchard supplies." He pinched the tarp between 2 fingers. "This belonged to my brother. He covered a fishing boat with it for 6 years. Any fish remaining you can have for free. The lumber? Reggie's." A voice came from the pantry. "Offcuts. I'll pay for your time." Alma stopped opening drawers. "Tonight? All of it. You have roof money? Some. Then spend roof money on the roof." Claire wrapped both hands around the cup. "I'm not taking free labor." Thomas looked at her for a long moment. "We're not fixing your house. We're keeping rain off your head until morning. That's still labor. This is why Ruth used to send you outside when people brought casseroles." "I don't remember that. You were too busy being outside." Reggie emerged holding 2 ceramic fuses in his palm. "Good news. Your wiring is old enough to qualify for historical protection." "And the bad news?" That was the good news. He crouched near the lamp and traced its cord to the outlet. "Somebody added these plugs later. Poorly. Don't use the one by the sink. Don't use the one upstairs. And don't touch the breaker box if your feet are wet." "My feet are wet now." "Then you're already learning. They worked until after 1. Thomas and Reggie climbed onto the roof despite Claire's protests, dragging the tarp over the worst section and securing it to boards under the eaves. Alma stayed inside, catching leaks and making Claire change into the dry socks. When the largest drip slowed to an occasional tap, Thomas came down with mud on his knees and a tear in his jacket. "This holds until wind changes," he said. "When will that happen?" He looked toward the window. "Sooner now that I said it." Claire found an old envelope in her purse and wrote their names across the front. Alma watched her. "What's that?" "Hours. Materials." "You're making a bill for yourself?" "I'm keeping track." "Fine. Put 2 hours for Thomas, 2 for Reggie." "You were here too. I supervised. Nobody can afford my rate." Thomas took the coffee from her. "She means don't write her down." "I know what she means." Alma's face sharpened, but Claire held her gaze. After a moment, Alma sighed. 1 hour. And not the tamales. Claire wrote it all down. Reggie inspected the wood stove chimney before they left and declared it filthy but usable if Claire kept the fire small. Thomas brought in enough dry apple wood for the night. Alma took the unused funeral cookies out of Claire's open suitcase, put them in a tin to keep mice away, and said nothing about why Claire had packed them among her clothes. At the door, Claire asked, "Why did you really come?" Reggie busied himself zipping his coat. Thomas looked to Alma. Alma looked back at him as if refusing an assignment. Finally, Thomas said, "Ruth fed a lot of people in this room." Claire waited. That isn't the whole reason, she said. No. What is? Alma adjusted her scarf. You opened the door. Then she stepped into the rain. Claire slept on the couch without cushions, wrapped in Ruth's coat and an old quilt she found upstairs. The house creaked whenever the wind pressed against it. Once, the tarp snapped so violently she sat upright, convinced the roof had peeled away. It held. At 7, someone hammered on the front door. Dean stood on the porch holding a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. He wore his orchard jacket and clean jeans, which meant he had dressed for work without expecting to perform any. You stayed here? Claire pulled Ruth's coat tighter. Good morning. Graham said you might. I assumed he was exaggerating. He usually does. Dean peered past her at the kitchen. His eyes moved over the cleared floor, the stockpots positioned beneath leeks, and the envelope on the table. He noticed everything. That was one reason the family trusted him with the orchard. Thomas and the others were here. Are you asking? I saw his truck leaving on the road. They put up a tarp. On company time? At midnight? Harvest. Midnight is company time. It's February. Dean handed her 1 coffee. It was black with 1 sugar, exactly how she drank it. Did you sleep at all? Some. You look terrible. You wore the same tie to Dad's funeral. He touched the knot as if she had caught him in it now. It's a funeral tie. It has tiny ducks on it. They're pheasants. Very respectful pheasants. His mouth twitched, but he suppressed it. Claire, this place isn't habitable. I gathered that when the inside weather matched the outside weather. Then why are you proving a point with your lungs? She stepped back, and Dean entered. He carried himself carefully around the table, avoiding the weak board near the stove without looking down. He knew the cottage better than he wanted her to know. You've been in here recently, she said. Not recently? You knew the floor. I worked here before you were born. Claire waited. Dean removed his cap and rubbed the flattened hair beneath it. Your grandfather made me eat lunch with the pruning crew for my first 3 seasons. Said I couldn't manage work I didn't understand. Did it help? Yes. Then why did you stop? The question landed harder than she intended. Dean turned toward the windows. Beyond the glass, the old apple trees shook rain from their bare limbs. This cottage hasn't been used properly in years, he said. Marlene's talked about clearing this parcel since the event barn started booking out. It could add 40 parking spaces without taking productive ground. My house could be parking. It's barely a house. It's exactly what Grandma left me. And I'm offering you cash instead. $20,000 now, no agent commissions, no waiting. You can get an apartment, pay off your car, go back to Portland. I don't have a job in Portland. You had one. I left it 3 years ago. I know what you did. The words came out rough, almost angry. Claire set her coffee down. Do you? Dean looked at her then. His eyes were bloodshot from grief or lack of sleep. Perhaps both. I know you were here, he said. It was not gratitude. It was not an apology. It was infuriatingly true. He reached into his jacket and put a business card on the table. On the back, he had written a number for an electrician. Let me at least have him inspect the place. Who pays? The orchard. No. Don't be ridiculous. I'll arrange it. With what money? The money I'm apparently supposed to be grateful for. Dean flinched nearly invisibly. The cottage has value as land, he said, not as a dwelling. I'm trying to keep you from sinking everything you have into sentiment. Whose sentiment? Yours. What about Grandma's? Ruth could love a person and still make a bad business decision. Claire looked at the business card. Did she make one when she left you the orchard? Dean went very still. Outside, tires hissed on the wet road. A pruning truck passed between the cottage and the first block, carrying bundled ladders. The driver tapped the horn twice. Dean glanced toward it automatically. The crew starts the north slope today, he said. Then you should go. He put on his cap. At the door, he stopped. Think about the offer before you spend money you can't get back. Claire almost asked whether he meant the roof or the 3 years. Instead, she shut the door behind him. The house felt colder after he left. On the table, the envelope showed 4 hours of work, a used tarp, scrap lumber, coffee, and 3 ceramic fuses Reggie had replaced from his own toolbox. Beside it lay Dean's electrician's number and the empty funeral cookie tin. Claire turned the business card face down. At 9, she drove to the Red Rooster Diner in shoes still stained with cemetery mud. The breakfast rush had thinned, leaving syrup bottles, crumpled napkins, and two men in reflective vests arguing amiably about snow that had not fallen. Joe Mercer stood behind the counter, scraping a grill with both hands. She saw Claire, looked once at the black dress beneath Ruth's coat, and kept scraping. "Funeral over?" she asked. "For everybody except me. That's usually how it works." Joe was 58, silver-haired, and built like someone who considered chairs optional. Claire had worked for her during community college and again for 3 months before leaving for Portland. "I need shifts," Claire said. Joe turned off the grill. "How many?" "As many as you can give me. You still know how to close?" "Yes." "You still cry when people send back eggs?" "I did that once." "You cried in the walk-in. They said over medium and meant over hard. Human beings are wicked." Joe tossed the scraper into the sink. "Night cook quit Tuesday. You can start tomorrow." Claire blinked. "That easy?" "No. I remember you." "That's different." Joe poured coffee into a clean mug and set it on the counter. "What happened to your fancy restaurant? It survived me. And Ruth?" Claire looked down at the coffee. Joe nodded once. "Sit. Then tell me what you need before you decide needing it is shameful." By noon, Claire had 6 night shifts on the schedule and the name of Joe's cousin, who repaired roofs. By 1, she had priced shingles, wiring, and a replacement well pump on the diner's office computer. By 2, she understood that Dean's $20,000 was not an insult because it was too little. It was dangerous because, for Claire, it was a fortune. When she returned to the cottage, Tomas stood among the 4 neglected trees with a pruning saw tucked through his belt. He was supposed to be on the north slope. "You're on company time," Claire called. "Lunch." He pointed at the nearest tree. Its center was a dark snarl of branches. "This one dies if nobody opens it up." Claire came closer. "Dean says they're wasted ground. Dean says many things from inside a truck." Thomas drew the saw and offered it to her handle first. Claire looked at the tree, then at the leaking cottage behind her. "I don't know where to start." "No," Thomas said. "But you asked." Thomas did not point to a branch. He walked around the tree twice, forcing Claire to follow through wet grass. "What do you see?" he asked. "A tree that makes Dean unhappy." "Dean is not here. He's never far away when somebody's using a saw." "What do you see?" Claire tilted her head. The tree had been planted before she was born. It leaned slightly downhill, its trunk split low into 3 thick leaders, each crowded with upright shoots. Moss softened the bark on the north side. "Dead wood," she said. "Where?" She touched a gray branch with peeling bark. Thomas nodded. "More. Branches crossing in the middle. More. One growing back toward the trunk." "Good. Which comes first?" "The dead one." "Why?" "Because it's dead." He gave her a flat look. "You attended college for this answer?" She took the saw from him. "I attended college for 2 semesters. We didn't reach trees." The blade bounced uselessly across the branch. "Not like you're slicing bread." Thomas placed 2 bent fingers against the bark. Small cut underneath first, then from the top, farther out. "Keeps the weight from tearing it." Claire crouched, mud soaked through one knee of her black dress. She worked until her shoulder burned and the branch dropped into the grass with a wet rush of twigs. The cut she had made was ragged. "Bad," Thomas said. "Thank you. Now make it good." He showed her where to trim back to the collar. The second cut came cleaner. A pale oval of wood shone against the dark bark. Claire ran her thumb near it without touching. "That's it?" "That's 1 branch." "How many are wrong?" "Today, 3." She looked into the tangled crown. "There are at least 30. And if you remove 30, the tree panics grows 50. 3 today." Thomas moved to a low limb and snapped off a dead spur. "What kind is it?" Claire asked. "Roxbury russet." "I thought those were green." "They are green. These were red." "You remember the tree beside it? I made pies with them." "You made pies with whatever Ruth put in a bucket. That is how ingredients work." The corner of his mouth moved. He identified the others as Baldwin, Northern Spy, and Spitzenberg, pronouncing the last one carefully, and then refusing to repeat it when Claire asked. Bellwether had grown those varieties before refrigerated storage and supermarket contracts pushed the orchard toward apples that were prettier, tougher, and easier to sell by the truckload. "Old doesn't mean good," Thomas said. "Some old trees are just old. But these are old and maybe good." Strong endorsement. Trees dislike promises. The orchard truck sounded its horn from the road. Lunch was over. Thomas took back the saw. Don't cut anything without me. It's my tree. Then buy your own saw and ruin it privately. He started toward the north slope. Thomas. He looked back. Claire held up the envelope she had brought from the cottage. I wrote down last night, I saw. I'm paying you. You're writing. When I have it, and if you don't, I will. He studied her with the same patience he had given the tree. You stayed with Alma at the clinic, he said. Claire frowned. What? Heat day. 4 summers ago. I remember. You lost a shift. Dean told me to go with her. Dean told you to drop her off. You stayed until they released her. Her phone was dead. So was yours. She shouldn't have been alone. No. Rainwater slid from the bill of his cap. You did not give us an invoice, he said. That was different. It always is when you are the one giving. Before Claire could answer, he turned and walked away, the saw tapping against his leg. She spent the afternoon on the cottage floor with a legal pad, 3 estimates, and a calculator from the junk drawer. Joe's cousin could patch the roof for $1,800 if the decking beneath the worst section had not rotted. A full replacement would cost at least $7,000. Rewiring began at 4. The well pump might be salvageable, but nobody would know until the line thawed enough to test. Claire had $4,600 in savings. Her car needed brakes. Her first diner paycheck would not arrive for 11 days. Dean's offer sat in her phone like a warm room. She turned the device face down and called the roof patcher. That night at the Red Rooster, she burned 2 orders of hash browns, broke a plate, and discovered the restaurant had changed coffee suppliers, but not its ancient practice of labeling nothing in the walk-in. Joe stood at the pass, inspecting a club sandwich. Too much turkey, she said. It has the listed portion. That's how I know it's too much. Menus are aspirational. You wrote the menu. I was younger and full of hope. A man at the counter asked whether the pie was homemade. Joe called back, "Somebody's home," and Claire nearly dropped the fryer basket laughing. The work came back through her hands before it returned to her mind. Turn the bacon before the eggs. Drop fries when the burger hits the grill. Start the pancakes after coffee refills because nobody enjoyed being watched while waiting for pancakes. By midnight, her feet hurt in the old familiar places. Joe locked the front door at 1. You still fast, she said. I used to be faster. You used to cry about eggs. I was 20. You were strange at 20. I'm strange now. Now you know where the mop is. Joe handed her a foil-wrapped slice of meatloaf and an envelope containing $60. Claire stared at it. My check isn't due. Advance. I didn't ask for one. You worked 8 hours. That's what the paycheck is for. Joe rested both hands on the counter. You going to make me listen to your pride every night? It's not pride. What is it? Claire could not give an answer that did not sound like pride wearing a clever hat. Joe pushed the envelope closer. Put it toward the roof. I prefer my cooks not drown between shifts. Claire took it. Write it down. Lord save me from honest women with ledgers. When Claire reached the cottage, a work light glowed in the kitchen window. She found Reggie beneath the sink with his boots sticking out, a pipe wrench beside his hip. She grabbed the nearest heavy object, which happened to be an iron skillet. Don't hit me, he called. Claire lowered the skillet. Why are you in my house? Because your door lock can be opened by insulting it. He slid out and held up a corroded valve. This was your water problem. Pump's fine. How did you get in? Graham had the spare key. Why does Graham have a spare key? Graham has all the keys. Dean loses them. Claire set the skillet on the counter. Did Graham ask you to do this? No. He asked me this morning if the pump was dead. I said I didn't know. Then it bothered me. You left the orchard to come here? After work. That is still work. Reggie sat up. He had a narrow, weathered face and eyes that always seemed mildly amused, even when the rest of him was not. You got beer? No. Then this isn't work. I'm paying you. That what the envelope's for? He nodded at the table. Yes. You got any money? Everyone keeps asking me that. Could be a clue. Claire crossed her arms. How much for the valve? Found it in my garage. How much? $8 in 2009. She wrote 12 on the envelope. Inflation, she said. Reggie looked offended. That valve didn't improve with age. He opened the tap. Air groaned in the pipes. Brown water burst into the sink, sputtered, and then ran clear enough to reveal the rust stains beneath it. Claire put her fingers under the stream. The water was painfully cold. It felt like luxury. Hot side still doesn't work, Reggie said. Heater shot. Let me have this moment. He leaned against the counter while she filled a glass. Dean, know you're staying? He came by. Betty enjoyed that. He offered me $20,000. Reggie's amusement disappeared. For the parcel? She nodded. You taking it? No. The answer had not felt fully true until she said it. Reggie picked up his wrench. Then you'll need a better lock. Marlene arrived the following afternoon with Ruth's yellow kettle and a cardboard box labeled Claire, Misk. She wore a wool coat the color of oatmeal and rubber boots so new the soles were still bright. Claire was on the porch pulling wet insulation from beneath the eaves. The roof patcher had exposed a section of blackened decking and gone to buy more plywood. Should you be doing that? Marlene asked. Probably not. I mean, in that dress. Claire looked down. She had cut the skirt off at the knee after Thomas's pruning lesson and layered it over leggings. It's already attended its main event. Marlene's mouth tightened. Your grandmother paid a great deal for that dress. No, she didn't. She bought it on clearance and made me take the price tag back for an adjustment when it dropped again. That sounds like her. Marlene climbed the steps and offered the kettle. Its enamel was chipped along the spout, and one side was blackened from years on a gas flame. I thought this belonged here, she said. Claire took it carefully. Thank you. And these are things from your room. Toiletries, books, some mail. You could have left them. I'm having the carpets cleaned Monday. There was the blade beneath the gift. Claire set the kettle inside. I'll get anything else tomorrow. I'm not throwing you out. It's your house. It's our family home. You own it. Marlene looked past her into the kitchen. Reggie had replaced the broken outlet covers. The boxes had been stacked against the far wall, and the long table was scrubbed clean except for the envelope of debts. Dean says you turned down his offer. I said I'd think about it. That means no when you say it. Then why ask? Marlene pressed her lips together. 20,000 is generous for an acre with no productive trees and a structure that needs demolition. Then you should be relieved I'm keeping it. The event barn supports the orchard in bad years. I know. Do you? Because food does not appear at farm stands through moral superiority. Claire leaned the damp insulation against the porch rail. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're grieving and angry, and those are expensive conditions. For once, Marlene sounded less cruel than tired. Claire lowered her voice. Why did she leave me this? I don't know. You were with her when she made decisions. She stopped discussing them with me. Why? Marlene looked toward the orchard. A crew moved between the distant rows, ladders rising and falling like narrow bones. Because she knew I'd argue, she said. With the cottage, with all of it. The honesty surprised Claire into silence. Marlene touched Ruth's scarf at her throat. Mother did not always distinguish between giving someone what they needed and giving them a lesson. What lesson? If I knew, I'd save us both the trouble. The roof patcher called from the yard, asking where Claire wanted the new plywood stacked. Marlene stepped aside. Before leaving, she put one hand on the yellow kettle. She used that here before she moved it to the farmhouse, she said. Back when she cooked lunches. I remember. No, you remember later. She cooked every day then. 40, sometimes 50 people. Marlene withdrew her hand. The cottage was never quiet in those years. By Sunday, the patched roof no longer leaked. The kitchen had cold running water, 2 safe outlets, and a lock Reggie claimed would require compliments to open. Claire owed more than she possessed and had slept 16 hours and 4 nights. She carried leftover meatloaf from the diner to the cottage after her shift and found Alma at the table with Thomas and Reggie. Someone had brought bread. Someone else had found bowls. Claire stopped in the doorway. Alma pointed to the stove. Your potatoes are getting cold. My potatoes? You own the house. Try to keep up. They ate beneath the weak lamp, passing food across the scarred wood. Thomas complained about Claire's tree cuts. Reggie complained about Thomas complaining. Alma took 2 bites of meatloaf and demanded the recipe. Headlights slowed on the orchard road. Dean's truck passed the kitchen window. His face turned briefly toward the light, and the people gathered around the table. He did not honk. He stopped the next morning. Claire was asleep upstairs when the pounding began. She came down wearing Ruth's coat over a diner t-shirt and opened the door to find Dean with one fist still raised. Your lock works now, he said. Reggie does quality work. So I see. He looked beyond her. The supper dishes were stacked beside the sink. 4 mugs sat upside down on a towel. Alma had left a covered bowl of potatoes in the refrigerator, although refrigerator was a generous term for an appliance that hummed loudly and cooled according to mood. "What time did everybody leave?" Dean asked. "Are you taking attendance? I'm asking whether my employees are spending their nights over here and showing up tired. They left before 11. Reggie started at 6 this morning. Then he got 7 hours of sleep." "Did he?" Claire rubbed her eyes. "You should ask him. I did. He told me to mind my own clock." "That sounds like Reggie." "It sounds like you've given people the idea this place is separate from the orchard. It is separate. You offered to buy it from me." Dean's jaw moved. Claire stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind her. The air had turned colder overnight. Frost silvered the weeds beneath the 4 trees. "Say what you came to say." He looked toward the equipment shed, where a tractor coughed to life. "Ruth closed this kitchen because of insurance problems. Ruth closed this kitchen because the stove caught fire. That was one of the insurance problems. The stove didn't catch fire. Bacon grease caught fire. Marlene threw flour on it." "How do you know that?" "Grandma told the story every time Marlene cooked bacon." Dean almost smiled. "It wasn't flour. It was powdered sugar. Made everything worse." "You were here?" I put it out. For a moment, the cottage filled with an old scene Claire had never seen. Dean younger, Marlene panicking, Ruth shouting, smoke coating the ceiling. Her family before they became fixed in their present shapes. Then Dean folded his arms. "I'm not forbidding anyone to visit you. How gracious. But if people come here during work hours, they clock out. If you ask them to work on this house, it's personal work, not orchard work. No company tools, no company materials. I already said that. To me. They need to understand it. They understand timesheets better than either of us. You know what I mean?" She did. The worker's presence at the cottage bothered him, in a way a tarp and a few dinners should not. He could not explain why without making it larger. Claire leaned against the porch post. "They're not children, Dean. I'm aware." "Then don't use me to give them rules you're afraid to give them yourself." His face hardened. "You've been back in the operation for less than 2 weeks. I'm not in the operation. That's exactly my point." He walked away before she could answer. At the orchard road, he paused beneath the northern spy and reached up to inspect one of Claire's cuts. His thumb moved over the clean collar. Then he continued toward the packing house without looking back. Claire began keeping 2 ledgers. In the first, she recorded every dollar she owed. Roof work, fuses, valve, lumber, 3 hours of Reggie's time, 2 of Thomas's, 1 of Alma's. In the second, she recorded what the cottage consumed: kerosene, firewood, groceries, laundromat quarters, gas for driving to the diner and back. The second ledger frightened her more. Money left in handfuls small enough to seem harmless. $9 for weather stripping, $14 for mouse traps, $27 for a space heater she could only use in the safe kitchen outlet. At the Red Rooster, she stopped buying coffee during her shift and drank hot water with lemon because employees paid 50 cents per cup. Joe discovered this on the 3rd night. "You're rationing coffee in a diner," Joe said. "That is a cry for help. I don't need 6 cups. You drank 9 when you were 20. My heart knows better now. Your heart has never been in charge." Joe filled Claire's mug and wrote "Employee Survival" beside the register. After closing, Claire carried home whatever could not be sold the next day. Biscuit ends became bread pudding. Soft tomatoes became soup. A roast that had dried beneath the heat lamp became stew after Alma arrived with peppers and announced that gravy concealed both mistakes and men. The cottage table began attracting people without invitation. Sometimes 1 person came, sometimes 6. They never stayed long on work nights. Thomas watched the clock more carefully after Dean's visit, which irritated Claire until she realized he was protecting her from being accused of taking what belonged to the orchard. She paid the first entries in her ledger with her first diner check. Reggie accepted his money, counted it, and said, "Too much." "It's exactly what you charge Dean. I charge Dean extra because he talks while I work. You talked while you worked. I was charming." Thomas refused his envelope until Claire put it beneath his windshield wiper. The next day he returned it with a pruning saw inside. A paper tag dangled from the handle. "For private ruin," he had written. Alma took her payment without argument, tucked it into her purse, and later left enough groceries on Claire's porch to cancel the victory. The roof patch held through 3 more storms. Reggie revived the water heater with a replacement heating element. Claire slept upstairs once the bedroom ceiling dried, although she kept a bucket beside the bed out of habit. Her car brakes began grinding. She turned up the radio. Susan came on a Thursday afternoon carrying a cashier's check for $5,000. She stood in the kitchen and held it out with both hands, as if presenting something at church. Claire stared at her mother's careful makeup, her recently trimmed hair, and the new camel-colored purse hanging from her shoulder. "What's this?" Claire asked. "Help." "From your distribution?" "Yes." Claire did not take it. Susan placed the check on the table. "The electrician alone will cost most of that. I haven't hired him. You can't live with 2 outlets. I have lived with less." "When?" "Portland. 4 roommates, 1 outlet, all of us emotionally unstable." "Could you please be serious?" "I am being serious." Susan removed her coat and laid it over a chair. She had grown up in the farmhouse, but in the cottage she moved like a guest in a museum nobody had asked to preserve. "I don't want you working nights and spending every day patching this place," she said. "You look exhausted." "I am exhausted." "Then take the check." Claire touched one corner. "Is this what you think I should have gotten?" Susan's eyes narrowed. "It's what I'm offering. That isn't what I asked. You always do that." "Do what?" "Turn help into a confession." Claire slid the check back across the table. Susan did not touch it. "Say it was unfair," Claire said. "I'm not buying your agreement. Just say it. Your grandmother wrote the will she wanted. The reserve wasn't in the will. You all chose to divide it. It belonged to us. I know who it legally belonged to. Then what do you want from me?" Claire looked at the yellow kettle on the stove. Its chipped lid trembled faintly as the water heated. "I want you to admit you knew how it would feel." Susan's face softened, but only for a second. "I knew you'd be hurt, and you did it anyway." "Yes." The word was quiet. Claire had expected denial and found she was less prepared for truth. Susan gripped the back of a chair. "I spent 20 years owing somebody. Your father's hospital bills, the mortgage after he died, money from Mother when the furnace broke, money from Dean when I couldn't make a payment. Every time I sat at that table, I knew exactly which parts of my life they had paid for. Grandma never held that over you. She didn't have to. I held it over myself. So now you're free. I would like to be. And I'm the price. That's cruel. It's accurate." Susan sat down hard. "You think because you came home for 3 years, you're the only person who gave anything up. I never said that. You say it with your face. Apparently I have a very efficient face. This isn't funny, no." The kettle began to whistle. Claire took it off the burner, but did not pour. Susan looked around the kitchen at the repaired lock, the ledger, the clean table. "Dean said they're all coming here." "Who?" "You know who. Thomas, Alma, Reggie, the Crews, not the Crews. A few people eat dinner sometimes. He thinks you're trying to make a point. Dean thinks weather happens to make a point. He's worried." "About me?" Susan hesitated. Claire laughed once. "There it is. He is responsible for the orchard. People depend on it. People like you." "Yes, Claire, people like me." Susan picked up the cashier's check. She held it between them. "This money doesn't come with a condition. Then call it my share. It isn't your share. Call the distribution unfair. I won't say something I don't believe. Then it has a condition." Susan's mouth trembled. She slipped the check back into her purse, put on her coat, and left without drinking tea. Claire stood at the table long after the door closed. The worst part was not that Susan had kept the money. It was that $5,000 would have solved problems Claire could hear humming in the walls, and her mother had known exactly how badly she needed it. At the diner that night, Claire overcooked 6 burgers. Joe waited until the last customer left before placing a raw onion on the cutting board in front of her. "Chop." "I've chopped onions all night. Those were for customers." "This one is medicinal. I'm not crying. That's why we need the onion." Claire laughed, then cried anyway, which made Joe look unbearably pleased with her diagnosis. The next morning, Claire found Thomas beside the Baldwin tree. He had already removed one upright shoot and was studying the crown. "You cut without me," she said. "My tree." "It's absolutely not your tree." "Then make the next cut." She took the saw. Tiny green tips had begun pushing from the buds. Spring was still weeks away, but the tree had already decided winter was ending. Claire chose a branch growing inward. Thomas shook his head. She chose another. He shook his head again. Are you going to help? I am helping. You're moving your head, saving words. Claire circled the trunk, forced herself to stop looking at individual branches, and tried to see the shape they made together. One leader crowded the center, stealing light from everything beneath it. Removing it felt too bold. She pointed. Thomas did not move. That one? Why? It blocks the middle. And it's strong, but in the wrong direction. He nodded once. The branch was thicker than her wrist. Claire made the underside cut, then shifted the saw higher. Halfway through, her arms began to shake. Thomas did not offer to take over. He only stood close enough to catch the weight if it fell badly. The branch cracked, dropped, and opened a clean window through the center of the tree. Sunlight reached the trunk. Claire stepped back, breathing hard. Beyond the orchard road, Dean stood beside his truck watching them. This time, he raised one hand. Thomas raised his saw in answer. Claire could not tell whether it was a greeting or a warning. Dean lowered his hand and walked across the road. Thomas rested the saw against his shoulder. Claire waited for one of them to explain what had just passed between them. Dean stepped over the fallen branch and looked into the open center of the tree. Sunlight striped his face. "Big cut," he said. "Too big?" Claire asked. "Depends what grows back." That's what Thomas said. Thomas shrugged. "Trees dislike promises." "He's been saying that since Dad taught it to him," Dean said. "Your dad taught me many things. Some were even true." Dean crouched beside the branch and examined the cut. His thumb hovered near the pale wood, just as Claire's had after her first attempt. "Clean enough," he said. "Your enthusiasm is overwhelming. You want applause? Join the event staff." He straightened, brushing bark from his palm. A new tear showed at one knee of his jeans. He had been working after all. "Thomas, West rose after lunch," he said. "Graham wants counts before he orders thinning crews. I know where I work. Then we're both fortunate." Thomas picked up the cut branch and dragged it toward the brush pile. Dean watched him go. "You've annoyed him," Claire said. "I've employed him for 22 years. Annoyance is part of the compensation. That should look nice on the benefits sheet." Dean's mouth tightened, but his attention remained on the tree. "Ruth hated russets," he said. "She made pies with them. She made pies with windfalls because she considered waste a character flaw." Claire touched one of the low branches. "Thomas thinks it might still produce." "It might. 4 trees aren't an orchard." "I know. Do you?" He said it without cruelty, which made it harder to dismiss. Dean looked toward the cottage. New plywood showed beneath the tarp where the roof patch ended. Claire expected another offer, another warning about sinking money into sentiment. Instead, he said, "There are spare rabbit guards behind the north shed. Ask before you take them." That almost sounded like permission. It was instruction. He left her with the branch at her feet and the unexpected knowledge that he wanted the tree to live. Graham came to the cottage that evening, carrying a laptop and 2 takeout containers from a Thai restaurant 30 miles away. Claire was leaving for the diner, tying her hair up as she crossed the porch. "You own food from another county," she said. "Did somebody die again?" "I need your opinion." "That sounds worse." He held up the containers. "Green curry. I have 8 minutes. Then chew fast." They sat at the long table. Graham opened his laptop before Claire removed the lid from her food. The screen showed rows of numbers divided by block, picker, bin weight, grade, and hourly cost. Colored cells ran across the page in cheerful shades that made the whole thing look less like labor than a board game. "I'm revising harvest compensation," he said. Claire took one bite. "I don't work for Bellwether. You understand the crews. I know some people who work there. You know how they hear things. With ears mostly." "Claire." She looked more closely. The existing harvest bonus appeared in one column, then vanished in the proposed model. In its place were speed incentives tied to bins picked per shift. A quality adjustment reduced the entire crew's pay if packing house grading found bruising above a set percentage. "Who controls the grading?" she asked. "We do." "Who sets the acceptable percentage?" "We do, based on buyer standards." "Can the workers see the fruit you reject?" "They don't need to inspect every apple. Then they can't challenge the adjustment. It isn't a courtroom." "No, Graham. In court, both sides get to see the evidence." He leaned back. "That's dramatic." "You asked?" "The old system pays the same bonus whether a crew outperforms or drags. Thomas's crew doesn't drag. This is not about Thomas. It will be when you hand it to Thomas." Graham turned the laptop toward himself. Speed can earn them more, unless one picker bruises fruit and the whole crew loses quality pay. That creates accountability. It creates 12 people watching one another's hands instead of the ladders. He closed the laptop halfway. You got all that in 3 minutes? I spent summers on the line. You carried water and flirted with the forklift driver. I did not flirt with Reggie. I meant Caleb. Caleb flirted with everybody. He flirted with a parking meter during peach days. Graham laughed despite himself, then reopened the screen. Claire tapped the column where the old bonus had disappeared. Why remove this? Because it's redundant. Does the crew know that? It's not guaranteed compensation. That wasn't my question. His expression cooled. We're trying to make the orchard sustainable. There are 600,000 reasons that sentence is going to sound funny this year. The remark hit. Graham stared at the spreadsheet. Claire regretted it and did not take it back. Dad didn't invent the distribution, he said. Ruth set up the shares. Ruth didn't vote to empty the reserve. It wasn't emptied. Fine, lightly vacuumed. You think I agreed with all of it? Did you object? Graham's silence answered. Claire checked the wall clock and stood. Show it to Alma before you announce it. She doesn't make management decisions. No, she just knows every way fruit gets damaged between a branch and a box. He packed away the laptop. Keep the curry, he said. Is that compensation for my consultation? It's a bribe for your silence. Too late. I've already told the forklift driver. Graham left smiling, but he did not show the plan to Alma. The first warm week brought buds to the old trees. They opened slowly, green tips separating into tight pink clusters. Claire found excuses to pass them whenever she came home from the diner. She had not expected something as small as a bud to alter the shape of her day. Thomas still limited her to 3 decisions per tree. Not cuts, he corrected. Decisions. Sometimes decision is leave it alone. Claire found leaving things alone much harder than sawing them off. She learned to recognize water shoots and fruiting spurs, canker and scale, the difference between a limb bending from age and one weakened at the crotch. Alma joined them once, listened for 10 minutes and said, "You explain trees more patiently than people." "Trees listen," Thomas replied. "No, trees cannot leave." The warmth held until a Thursday afternoon when the temperature began dropping too fast. At the Red Rooster, every grower who came through the door talked about frost. They checked weather apps between bites, offering different predictions as though the cold might choose the most confidently spoken one. Joe watched Claire glance at her phone for the 6th time. "Go," she said. "I'm working." "You're ruining eggs with your mind elsewhere. I can't do anything about frost. You can worry closer to the trees." Claire left after the dinner rush, carrying 2 insulated dispensers of coffee and every unsold biscuit in the diner. Bellwether's wind machines were already turning when she reached the orchard. Their low mechanical thrum rolled through the dark like distant aircraft. Headlights moved between rows, workers checked sprinklers, cleared clogged emitters, and watched thermometers mounted at different elevations. Dean stood beside the equipment shed, shouting into his phone. Graham was loading fuel cans into a truck, his good coat streaked with grease. "You brought coffee?" he called when Claire got out. "No, these are decorative. Put one in Dad's truck before he starts drinking gasoline." Claire carried the other toward the lower blocks. Thomas appeared from between the trees, wearing a headlamp and 2 jackets. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad if wind stops. Worse if clouds clear. What about my trees?" He looked toward the cottage acre. "Old ladies have survived cold before. That is not an answer. It's the only one until morning." Alma organized food on the tailgate of a pickup. She handed biscuits to workers as they passed and made Claire pour coffee because Claire's hands were warmer. For 6 hours, nobody belonged to separate branches of the family. Dean fueled machines. Graham hauled hose. Reggie coaxed a failing pump through the cold, with curses soft enough to sound affectionate. Claire carried cups, marked temperatures, and stood near the old trees when there was nowhere else she was useful. At 3 in the morning, Dean came down the row and found her beneath the northern spy. "You'll freeze," he said. "So will everything else. Trees don't care if you watch." "I know." He stood beside her anyway. The blossoms were still closed tight, their pink tips silvered with moisture. The wind machine beat overhead. "Your father hated frost nights," Dean said. Claire looked at him. Dean almost never offered Daniel's name without being asked. Why? He couldn't stand waiting to learn whether work mattered. That sounds familiar. Dean pushed his hands deeper into his pockets. He would have cut the center branch too. Because it was right? Because Thomas told him not to. Claire smiled into the dark. By sunrise, ice glazed the low grass, but most blossom clusters remained alive. Thomas cut a bud open with his pocket knife and showed Claire the green center. She laughed from relief. Dean bought breakfast for the crew, not from the Red Rooster, which Joe took as a personal insult, but from a chain restaurant near the highway. He stood in the packing house passing out paper bags himself. The moment should have felt generous. Instead, Claire watched Alma accept a biscuit from the man whose crop she had spent the night protecting, and wondered whether Graham's colored spreadsheet was still closed in his car. The trees bloomed white 3 days later. For 1 week, the cottage acre looked almost extravagant. Petals gathered on the porch, caught in Claire's hair, and floated in the dishwater. Customers at the diner asked where she had found the blossoms clinging to her coat. Then the petals fell, and the real work began. Graham announced the new harvest compensation plan in the packing house on a wet Monday in May. Claire was not there. She heard about it when Alma entered the cottage after shift, placed a folded sheet of paper beside the ledger, and took off her glasses. Thomas came in behind her without speaking. Reggie followed, carrying 3 mugs, though no coffee had been made. Claire looked at their faces. What happened? Alma tapped the paper. Your cousin found a new way to pay us more, she said. It begins by taking away what we already had. Claire unfolded the sheet. The colored spreadsheet had become clean black numbers and cheerful bullet points. The old harvest bonus was gone. At the bottom, Dean's name appeared above Graham's. Thomas pulled out a chair but did not sit. Tell us, Alma said, where they hid the part that belongs to us. Claire read the page twice. The first time, she followed the numbers. The second, she searched for some sentence Graham might have added after their conversation. A review process. A guaranteed minimum. Anything acknowledging that grading fruit was not the same as weighing flour. There was nothing. The speed rate increases after the 4th bin, she said. Alma folded her arms. We can read, I know. Then read the other part. Claire set the paper flat. Quality pay is reduced if damage exceeds the target. For who? The whole crew, even if damage happens in transport? It says grading determines whether it's picking damage. Who grades? Claire looked at her. Alma's mouth tightened. Say it. Bellwether. And if Bellwether says we bruised it? There's no appeal listed. Reggie lowered himself into a chair. Could appeal to the clean black numbers. Thomas still stood. You knew? Claire felt the question before she understood it. Graham showed me a draft. When? The night before the frost. And you said nothing? I told him to show Alma. Alma gave a humorless laugh. He showed me today, at the meeting where it was already finished. I didn't know he was announcing it. You knew the bonus was gone. I told him it was a bad idea. Thomas lifted the sheet between 2 fingers. But you did not tell us. No. The words seemed to take up the whole kitchen. Claire wanted to explain that Graham had come as her cousin, not as management. That he had asked for an opinion, not permission. That she had not wanted to become exactly what Dean feared, a person outside the orchard, turning the cottage into a place where complaints were collected and sharpened. Every explanation made her silence sound more deliberate. I should have told you, she said. Alma removed her glasses and cleaned them on the edge of her shirt. Yes. I'm sorry. Reggie examined the ceiling. Thomas put the page back on the table. You sit here with us. He knows that. This is why he came. I know that now. You knew it then. Claire looked at him. Part of me did. Thomas nodded once, as though she had finally made the correct cut. He took his jacket from the chair. Where are you going? Reggie asked. Home. We just got here. You can be angry sitting down. I need to walk. Alma followed him to the door. Before leaving, she turned to Claire. Do not speak for us, she said, and do not keep quiet for us either. The door closed. Reggie remained at the table, turning one empty mug between his palms. You staying to make me feel better? Claire asked. No. Good. My truck won't start. She stared at him. Battery, he said. I knew before I came in. Despite herself, she laughed. Alma's going to leave you here. She has before. They went outside with jumper cables. Alma and Thomas were still at the edge of the road, arguing in low voices. Alma saw Reggie's raised hood and threw both hands into the air. By the time his engine turned over, nobody was less angry, but all four of them had pushed the truck out of the mud together. Claire carried the compensation sheet to the packing house the next morning. Graham was on a ladder above the sorting line, measuring the distance between a light fixture and a steel support. He had a pencil behind one ear and dust across the front of his shirt. "You used me," Claire said. He looked down. "Good morning. You showed me the plan because you knew I'd tell you how they'd react. That was the point of asking your opinion. You didn't change anything. I changed the fourth bin rate. You raised it 3 cents, which matters over a full harvest." "To whom?" Graham climbed down carefully. Several temporary tables had been rolled aside to make room for a new scanner above the conveyor. Bright orange extension cords crossed the concrete floor. "We modeled 6 versions," he said. "This one rewards productive crews and protects quality. It gives you control over both definitions." "Did Alma send you?" "No." "Then why are you here?" "Because I should have told them when you showed me. That's between you and them." She hated that he was right. Graham set the tape measure on the belt. "Dad wanted to announce it after thinning. I convinced him to do it early so people had time to understand. They understand. They haven't worked under it yet. They worked under the old one for years. The old bonus rewarded longevity, not performance. Those are not opposites. In this orchard, sometimes they are." A door slammed near the loading bay. Dean entered carrying a box of irrigation fittings. He took in Claire, Graham, and the sheet in her hand. "No," he said. Claire blinked. "No what?" "No family meeting on my packing floor. Then let's have it in your office. I have work. So do I." Dean put down the box. "You work at a diner. I meant right now. I know what you meant." Graham picked up his tape measure. "I'm going back up the ladder." "Stay," Dean said. Graham stayed. Claire held out the page. "The crew thinks you took away their harvest bonus. We replaced it with performance pay. Did you tell them the old bonus was ending before you designed this?" "It was discretionary. That's a word people use when they want someone else to count on money without ever admitting they count on it." Dean's eyes narrowed. "Have Thomas and Alma asked you to negotiate?" "No." "Then don't. I'm asking as family. You said you weren't part of the operation. I'm not. Then you can't be family when you want access and separate when you want innocence." The sentence struck too close to what Thomas had said. Claire folded the sheet along its existing crease. "You knew Graham showed me?" "No." Dean turned toward his son. Graham's face gave away nothing. "I wanted an outside read." "Claire isn't outside," Dean said. Nobody spoke. He seemed to hear himself. His expression shifted, the opening closing almost as soon as it appeared. "She has relationships here," he corrected. "That doesn't make her management." "I never wanted to be management," Claire said. "Then stop managing." She left the page on the conveyor and walked out. For 3 days, the cottage table remained empty, except for Claire's ledgers and the yellow kettle. She worked nights, slept badly, and made exactly 3 decisions beneath each old tree, without Thomas there to approve them. On the 4th morning, she found a paper sack hanging from the Baldwin's lowest branch. Inside was a cheese sandwich and a note in Alma's blocky handwriting. "You cut too much from the north side." Claire ate the sandwich under the tree. The fruit set thick after bloom. Tiny green apples appeared where petals had fallen, clustered so closely that their weight would eventually exhaust the branches. Thomas returned with thinning shears and no reference to the compensation sheet. Claire apologized again. He handed her the shears. 1 apple every fist. "That's your response? That is today's work." She wanted forgiveness spoken clearly enough to keep, but Thomas was already demonstrating how to choose the strongest fruit in a cluster. Claire followed. When she tried to leave for the diner that afternoon, her brake pedals sank almost to the floor. The car stopped halfway into the road, so Reggie, passing in the orchard truck, braked behind her and leaned on the horn. Claire got out. "It's not as bad as it looks. You're parked sideways. The angle is cosmetic." He climbed into her car, pressed the pedal once, and turned off the engine. "No, I have work." "No, I'll take it slow." "You'll take my truck." Dean said, "No company vehicles." "My truck is mine." "The ugly one?" "Orchard truck pulls you back." He called Alma, who arrived 10 minutes later, driving Reggie's rusted pickup. Reggie hooked Claire's car to the orchard truck and towed it beside the cottage. The repair took most of Claire's next paycheck. She tried to add Reggie's hours to the ledger. He took the pen from her and wrote, "Breaks." "So she doesn't kill anyone," then drew a line through the amount. Claire rewrote it on the next line. He shook his head. You're exhausting. Joe says it's my gift. You keep in the car? I need it. That wasn't the question. The engine burned oil. The rear tires were nearly bald, and a warning light had glowed on the dashboard since Oregon. Selling it would pay for safe wiring and half the cottage. Keeping it allowed Claire to work. I don't know, she said. Good answer. Trees dislike promises. Trees don't have transmissions. As spring thickened into summer, the 4 old trees dropped much of their fruit naturally. Claire gathered the hard green apples from the grass, unable to stop feeling that each one represented a failure. Thomas kicked them into piles. Tree knows what it can carry, does it? No. That's why we thin. At Bellwether, the new optical scanner was installed above the packing line. Graham said it would identify color and surface defects faster than human graders. Alma said it identified whatever it had been told to see. Reggie disliked the drive assembly from the day it arrived. Too much load on the old gearbox, he told Graham, while Claire stood nearby with a tray of diner sandwiches. Bearings already singing. I don't hear anything, Graham said. You hear with spreadsheets. When can you replace it? When you order the part. Graham looked at the cost on Reggie's phone. Can it run through early harvest? It can run until it doesn't. We need to get through Lodi and Ginger Gold. Order next quarter. Reggie looked at Claire, not for support, but because she happened to be there. She lifted both hands. I don't manage. He snorted. Nobody does. The gearbox failed on the second full packing day. Claire heard the bang from the cottage. A metallic shriek followed. Then the line stopped so abruptly that apples rolled from the stalled belts and struck the concrete. One full bin tipped against the feed ramp. Workers jumped back as fruit poured across the floor. By the time Claire reached the packing house, Reggie had killed the power. Alma was checking a worker's bruised wrist. Graham stood beside the control panel, white-faced. Dean entered through the loading bay. What happened? The bearing seized, Reggie said. You were running it. I was trying to keep the belt aligned. You knew the gearbox was bad. I told him. Reggie pointed at Graham. Dean turned. Graham hesitated 1 second too long. He said it could make early harvest, Graham said. Reggie stared at him. That is not what I said. Nobody moved among the scattered apples. Dean looked at the stopped line, then at the clock above the office door. We've got a truck coming at 4. Then call and move it, Reggie said. This is down until the gearbox is replaced. You should have shut it down before failure, and you should have bought the part. Dean's face changed. Go home, he said. Reggie pulled off his work gloves. Gladly. The deduction appeared on his paycheck, Friday. Damaged product and lost production time. That evening, he came to the cottage carrying his tool bag. He placed his bellwether keys on the long table beside Claire's ledger. How much did they take? Claire asked. Enough. We can fight it. You can. What does that mean? It means add one more thing to your book. She reached for the pen. Reggie pushed it back toward her. Put down 0, he said. That's how many more hours I work for Bellwether. Claire did not write 0. She closed the ledger instead. You can't quit over one paycheck. I quit over 22 years and one paycheck. What will you do? Reggie looked at his tool bag. Sleep late tomorrow and Monday. Sleep professionally. You need work. Thank you, Susan. Claire flinched. Reggie saw it and rubbed one hand over his face. Sorry. No, you aren't. Not enough to take it back. He sat at the table. Without his bellwether jacket, he seemed smaller, as though the orchard had added shape to him, even when he complained about it. Thomas said nearby growers won't hire one mechanic full-time, Claire said. Thomas says things before people need to hear them. It's irritating. So, work for more than one. Reggie looked up. Repair calls, she said. Pumps, tractors, packing lines. You're already fixing things for people, for beer. Start charging. Then they'll expect it fixed. They already expect it fixed. He leaned back and studied her. You got customers hidden upstairs? I work in a diner where farmers complain for sport. Complaining isn't hiring. It's the larval stage. A laugh escaped him before he could prevent it. Claire opened the ledger again, turned to a clean page, and wrote repair calls at the top. Reggie reached over and closed it. I didn't say yes. You didn't say no. I said I was sleeping. Fine, I'll schedule around your nap. He took his keys from the table, his truck keys, not Bellwether's, and left the orchard set where Dean would be sure to see them. At the Red Rooster, Joe listened while filling salt shakers. So the mechanic needs work, she said. Independent work, meaning he quit angry, he quit correctly. Those are not opposites. Claire wiped the counter. Do you know anyone who needs equipment repaired? Everyone who owns equipment? Anyone who will pay? Joe considered this more seriously. At booth 6, Della Pike was eating peach pie with a spoon and reading an agricultural supply catalog. She ran a small pear orchard east of town with her sister and possessed the unnerving ability to hear her own name through walls. My sprayer leaks, Della called. Joe did not turn. Your sprayer is older than I am. It has fewer miles. Claire carried the coffee pot to Della's booth. What kind of leak? If I knew, I'd fix it. Would you pay Reggie to look? Della lowered the catalog. Bellwether Reggie? Just Reggie now. Dean fire him? He quit. Same volume, different song. Della scooped up the last bite of pie. Tell him 8 tomorrow. If he's late, I deduct coffee. Claire wrote the address on an order pad. Before her shift ended, a grower named Mel Sanderson had asked whether Reggie worked on irrigation pumps, and Joe's produce supplier wanted somebody to inspect the hydraulic lift on his delivery truck. Claire called Reggie at 1 in the morning. He answered after 6 rings. This better be fire. Sprayer at 8. Irrigation pump after lunch. Hydraulic lift Tuesday if you can do trucks. Silence. Reggie? I was sleeping professionally. Can you do trucks? I can do anything people have made worse by touching. Good. What do you charge? Another silence. That seems low, Claire said. I didn't give you a number. Exactly. He arrived at the diner at 7:30 wearing clean coveralls and carrying a notebook. Claire had made him a list with names, phone numbers, addresses, and reported problems. He read it over black coffee. You put estimated hours. You need a schedule. You put travel time. You need to charge for it. You put invoice terms. You need to get paid. He turned the page over. Where did you learn this? I worked in a restaurant that catered events. Nobody pays a caterer unless the invoice frightens them. Della entered wearing rubber boots and a sleeveless blouse, sat beside Reggie without asking, and stole one of his pieces of toast. You look nervous, she said. I'm eating. Same thing for men. She drove him to her orchard. Claire went home and slept until noon, then woke to 3 missed calls from Reggie. The sprayer needed a hose Della could have ordered herself. Reggie had repaired it by cutting and fitting a spare from her shed, then discovered a cracked pump housing she had not mentioned. He wanted to know whether the second job could move to 2. You're calling me like I'm your dispatcher, Claire said. You made a schedule. That was a courtesy. It has columns. Claire called Mel and moved the pump appointment. Then she called the produce supplier and confirmed Tuesday. By the time Reggie returned to the cottage, she had drawn up an invoice from a template on Joe's office computer. He examined it at the table. You added the pump housing. You replaced it. Used part. It worked. Della will complain. Della complains when given free pie. He drove back to deliver the invoice. Della paid before dinner. Reggie stood in the cottage kitchen holding the check as though it had been issued by a suspicious foreign government. She added $20, he said. Coffee deduction, said I didn't talk enough. Claire wrote the payment in a new section of the ledger. Income looked strange there. Until then, every page had recorded loss, debt, or survival. How much do I owe you? Reggie asked. Nothing. You spent half the day on calls. I slept through the actual work. Must be management? I'm not management. That phrase following you around? She looked at him. He pulled 2 20s from his wallet and placed them on the table. I don't want it. That's what I said about the tarp. This is different. It always is when you were the one giving. She hated Tomás for making the sentence portable. Claire accepted 20 and wrote it down as scheduling. Reggie took the other bill back. Robbed me, he said. Your invoice was too low. Della gave me toast. Then you're rich. Word traveled faster than Claire's car. Within a week, Reggie had 9 calls. 2 were barely worth the gas. One grower took 4 days to pay. Another tried to exchange a broken mower for 6 hours of labor. Reggie accepted the mower, fixed it, and sold it for twice the invoice, which weakened Claire's argument that barter was foolish. The cottage table became a scheduling desk after breakfast and a repair bench after dinner. Reggie left grease on Claire's ledger. Claire left invoices in his tool bag. They argued over mileage, parts markup, and whether his time spent staring silently at a machine counted as diagnostic labor. It's thinking, he said. It looks like resentment. Same muscles. On Friday, Graham came to the cottage carrying the replacement gearbox Bellwether should have bought weeks earlier. He found Reggie rebuilding a pump on the porch. Dad wants the line running by Monday, Graham said. Reggie did not look up. Then you should get started. I'm asking you. No, you're telling me what Dean wants. Graham set down the box. We'll pay your regular rate. My regular rate changed. Fine. Give me the number. Reggie named a price nearly twice his old hourly wage. Graham blinked. That's excessive. That's Sunday. It's Friday. You waited too long. Claire stood inside the screen door, saying nothing. Graham looked at her anyway. Can I speak to him without an audience? Reggie tightened a clamp. She owns the porch. You docked his paycheck, Claire said. I didn't. You signed off on it. Dad handled payroll. You told him Reggie said the gearbox could make early harvest. Graham's face went red. I said what I remembered. Reggie finally looked up. You remember better now? Yes. The admission was so direct that Claire stepped outside. Graham crouched beside the pump, keeping his clean pants away from the grease. I should have ordered the part. You warned me. I thought we could stretch it. Tell Dean. I did. And? He still thinks you should have shut down the line. He's wrong. I know. Reggie resumed working. Graham waited. Will you fix it? Not until the money comes back. I can pay you now. The money from my check. Graham glanced toward Claire. I don't control payroll. Then you don't control the repair. He picked up the gearbox and left with it. Dean arrived 20 minutes later. He did not bring coffee. Where is he? He asked Claire. Who? My mechanic. On the porch. Dean rounded the corner. Reggie had heard his truck and continued working. I'll restore the deduction, Dean said. Reggie tightened another bolt. Why? Because we need to move forward. That is not a reason. Because the equipment failure wasn't solely your responsibility. Whose was it? Dean's eyes flicked toward Claire. She stayed where she was. Graham should have ordered the part, Dean said. And you should have shut down the line. Reggie nodded. Keep the money. For God's sake. You want a mechanic? Hire one. I had one. You had a person you blamed when your machine broke. Dean's face hardened. You worked here 22 years. Yes. That means nothing? It means you knew me long enough to do better. Dean turned toward Claire. You making a business out of this? Out of what? People leaving the orchard. He had 3 customers before I had breakfast. You're making it easier. The accusation found its mark because it was true. Claire folded her arms. Yes. Dean stared at her. I'm making it easier for him to leave a job that took his wages after blaming him for your decision. My decision? You signed the deduction. You know nothing about running this orchard? No. But I know what it costs to stay somewhere because leaving feels impossible. The words silenced all 3 of them. Dean looked toward the cottage, the repaired roof, the open windows, the long table visible through the screen. Then he left. Reggie watched the truck disappear up the road. You could have let me handle that. I know. You promised Alma. She said don't speak for you. You spoke around me. I'll improve. He grunted and returned to the pump. On Monday, Graham paid Reggie's Sunday rate to repair the line. Dean restored the deduction without apology. Reggie completed the work, handed Alma the restart checklist, and left his bellwether keys on Dean's desk a second time. His schedule filled the next 2 weeks. Thomas began lingering over it at supper. I have a pruning job Saturday, he said one night. 6 acres. Owner wants price by tree. Hourly is safer, Claire said. Hourly punishes knowing what you're doing. Reggie pointed his fork at her. Put him in the book. Alma looked from Thomas to the grease-stained ledger. Then she unfolded Bellwether's first quality report under the new pay plan. 3 crews had lost money. She placed one finger on the damage percentage. Can your book, she asked Claire, find work for someone who knows why this number is a lie? If the number is a lie, I need to know what the truth looks like, Claire said. Alma pulled the report closer. It says picker damage, she said. But look at the bruises they counted. Stem punctures, yes. Compression, no. Those apples sat too high in the bin or hit the transfer belt wrong. Scanner sees a dark spot. Graham tells it the dark spot belongs to the crew. Can you prove that? I can show it. At Bellwether? Not if Dean sees me touching his machine. Thomas looked toward the window. You still work there. I know where I work. The echo made Reggie grin into his plate. Claire studied the report. The scanner's quality score had reduced pay across 3 crews, including workers who had spent frost night saving Bellwether's bloom. The highest deduction belonged to the lower block, where fruit traveled over the steepest section of conveyor. What do you want me to find? Claire asked. A packing job? A problem. That's less specific. Every packing house has one. Della Pike had 4. Her pears entered the wash line clean and emerged with black marks along one side. The sizing rollers dropped smaller fruit into the wrong channel. A fan blew labels off the boxes. The line supervisor, Della's sister May, had coped by threatening the machinery in language that impressed even Reggie. Claire arranged for Alma to spend one afternoon watching the line. Della objected to the fee. "I can watch my own pears," she said. "Then why haven't you found the damage?" Claire asked. "Because I'm watching the sprayer Reggie fixed." The sprayer is fixed. That's when machines become arrogant. Alma arrived at noon in her bellwether work shoes and stood beside Della's line without touching anything. For 40 minutes, she watched pears move. She asked May to slow the belts, then speed them up. She lifted fruit from different points and cut each one open. "The wash water's too cold," she finally said. Della squinted at the tank. "Water is water. Fruit comes in warm. Cold water changes pressure inside. Marks show later." Reggie leaned against a support. "That all?" "No. This guide is half an inch low." She pointed to a strip of rubber along the transfer. "Pears turn when they hit it. Same side strikes the rail." May stared at the line. "I told you it was turning them." "You said the pears had developed a preference," Della replied. "I was speaking mechanically." They raised the guide, adjusted the water temperature, and ran 2 more bins. The marks almost disappeared. Della paid Alma's fee without complaint, which Claire understood to be a greater compliment than praise. At the cottage that evening, Alma laid the check beside Reggie's and Thomas's first pruning deposit. "Put it in the book," she said. "Under what?" "Knowing things." Claire wrote, "Packing consultation." Alma watched the amount enter the income column. "How much for you?" $20. "You spent 2 hours arranging it." Reggie established the rate. "Reggie cannot establish the price of a banana. I don't work on bananas. You don't know what they cost. Neither does anybody. They change." Claire tapped the ledger. "I'm taking 10% for scheduling and invoices, capped if the job is large." Thomas frowned. "Who decided?" "Nobody." "I'm proposing." "You already wrote $20. I can erase." "No," Alma said. "Leave it. But every rate goes on the table, meaning everybody sees." Reggie lifted his mug, except Della. "Charge her extra for toast." They made their first rules over cold meatloaf. Each person set a base rate. Travel and materials were separate. Nobody accepted a job on someone else's behalf. Claire took 10% for calls, schedules, and collection, but only after the worker was paid. If a customer delayed payment, Claire did not cover it from her own money. That last rule required argument. "You did it for Mel," Reggie said. "It was $80. That is doing it." He needed a pump before irrigation. He owned 3 trucks. 2 didn't run. Then he needed me more. Alma pointed at Claire with her fork. "No rescuing people who own more trucks than you." Claire wrote the rule in the margin. The work did not become steady simply because it had rules. Thomas's 6-acre pruning job was postponed when the owner decided summer pruning looked too aggressive. Reggie lost half a day driving to inspect a tractor, whose owner failed to mention it had been dismantled and stored in 3 buildings. Della recommended Alma to a cherry grower who wanted a complete packing redesign for the price of lunch. But the calls kept coming. At the Red Rooster, growers began leaving messages for Claire on the backs of receipts. Joe mounted a clipboard beside the register and labeled it, "Farmers with Broken Things." "Does pruning count as broken?" Claire asked. "Everything alive is broken eventually." "You're comforting." "I make pie." Claire reduced her diner schedule from 6 nights to 5. The lost shift frightened her more than she admitted. Repair calls paid Claire in irregular 20s and 40s. The diner paid every other Friday, whether somebody's tractor started or not. Her car developed a new rattle. Reggie listened for 10 seconds and said, "Heat shield." "Dangerous?" "Only to your piece." "Can we remove it?" "Your piece?" "The shield." "No." She drove with the radio louder. The 4 old trees carried less fruit than Claire had imagined during bloom. The Baldwin dropped heavily in July. Insects scarred the Spitzenbergs. The Roxbury russets grew rough-skinned and misshapen, many with a brown netting that made them look diseased. "They're supposed to look ugly," Thomas told her. "That's convenient. Cut one." It was still green when Claire sliced it at the table. The flesh snapped beneath the knife. She tasted sharpness first, then sugar, then something nutty she could not name. "Not ready," Thomas said. Claire took another bite. "You said not ready. I heard you. You don't listen." "I listen selectively." She brought 3 to the diner. Joe peeled one, chewed a slice, and put the rest into an apple pie with 2 supermarket Granny Smiths. The flavor deepened in the oven. A regular customer asked why the pie tasted different. Joe said, "Old apples and poor judgment," then sold the remaining slices before the dinner rush ended. By late August, Claire was bringing a bushel at a time, the fruit bruised if she piled it deeply, and its rough skin discouraged customers who saw it whole. In pies, preserves, and a dark cider syrup Joe made by reducing juice on the back burner, nobody cared what it looked like. Claire paid Joe for kitchen time after closing. Joe objected, until Claire threatened to add her to the ledger as unpaid labor. "Extortion," Joe said, learned from management. They filled jars while the diner cooled around them. Claire's hands smelled of cloves and apple peel. She arrived at the cottage near dawn and slept until the roof patcher called to warn her the temporary repair might not survive another winter. The full roof estimate had risen to $7,600. Claire sat beneath the patch section and did the arithmetic. Her savings had fallen below $2,000. The car might sell for $3 if she lied politely about the rattle. The old trees, after jars, diner ingredients, and kitchen time, had earned $186. 4 trees were not an orchard. But when Claire wrote $186 in the income column, she did not feel foolish. She bought a new gutter. At Bellwether, early harvest gave way to gala. The packing house ran 10-hour days. The scanner continued assigning damage to crews, though Alma demonstrated that marks increased on fruit routed through the lower transfer belt. Graham adjusted the belt, but refused to recalculate the first reports. "The pay period is closed," he told her. "The bruises are not. We corrected the cause. You corrected one cause. Alma, I can't relitigate every bin. You do not want to look because you already paid less." Graham's expression tightened. "Be careful." She repeated the conversation at the cottage without changing his words. Thomas stared at the compensation report. "He told you, be careful?" He was afraid. Of being wrong where other people can see. Reggie pushed his chair back. "Best place to be wrong is before the machine breaks." Nobody laughed. Alma remained at Bellwether because walking out during active harvest would punish the workers she supervised more than Dean. Thomas stayed because his crew had committed to the season. They did their jobs with the same skill as before, but something had changed. At supper, they no longer spoke of Bellwether as ours. They said the orchard. Susan called Claire after Dean complained that weekend pruning jobs were making Thomas tired. "Are you trying to pull people away?" she asked. "Thomas is an adult. That's what you said to Dean. Because it remains true when repeated. You know how this looks." Claire stood on a chair in the cottage kitchen, labeling jars. "How does it look? Like you're angry about the inheritance and using the workers to hurt the family." Claire climbed down. "Do you believe that?" "I believe you're hurt. That wasn't my question." Susan sighed into the phone. "The orchard income supports me now. Then maybe you should ask how the people earning it are being treated." "I don't supervise employees." "No, you just collect the money. That is unfair. So was the compensation change. You don't even work there." The family had found a sentence they all enjoyed. Claire looked at the long table. Reggie's repair schedule occupied one end. Thomas's pruning estimate lay beside it. Alma's packing notes were weighted beneath Ruth's yellow kettle. "No," she said, "I work here." She ended the call before Susan could answer. The main harvest finished in October. Bellwether's crews earned less than the previous year, despite picking more fruit. Dean held a supper in the event barn and thanked everyone for adapting to modernization. Marlene served roast pork beneath strings of white lights. Susan sat at the family table. Claire was not invited. Thomas, Alma, and Reggie came to the cottage afterward. Others followed: Luis from irrigation, Vanessa from the grading line, Howard, who drove bins, and Marta, who had picked Bellwether fruit for 11 seasons. They brought plates wrapped in foil and set them on Ruth's scarred table. Claire found chairs in the pantry, then more chairs. The kitchen grew loud enough that people had to lean close to hear one another. Some asked Reggie about repair work. Others asked Tomas what nearby orchards paid. Vanessa wanted Alma to teach her grading. Howard had a truck and wondered whether growers needed bin hauling. Claire stood at the ledger while voices crossed around her. "This cannot all go in my book," she said. "Why not?" Reggie asked. "Because it's not mine." Alma placed both palms on the table. "Good," she said. "Now we can decide whose it is." Claire looked at the people crowding the kitchen. "Not mine," she said again. "The cottage is mine. The ledger isn't." Reggie lifted his paper plate. "Technically, the ledger is also yours. You spilled gravy on it. Marked my territory." Howard leaned forward. "We could make it a dispatch." He was a quiet man until trucks were mentioned. Then his sentences became longer and included axle weights. "Growers call here," he continued. "Claire sends out whoever does the job. Mechanic, pruning, hauling, packing. And Claire decides who gets work?" Vanessa asked. "No," Claire said. "You already decide Reggie's schedule. Reggie decides. I call people until his decision becomes possible." "That sounds like deciding with extra steps," Reggie said. Thomas shifted near the stove. "Too many people means promises. We do not have enough work. We didn't have any 8 months ago," Claire said. "We had jobs." "At Bellwether," Alma replied. "That is not the same as having work." Marta tapped the edge of the compensation report. "If we leave, Dean replaces us." "Maybe," Thomas said. "With who?" "Someone. Someone picks badly. Someone gets better." Marta frowned, dissatisfied by his refusal to promise that Bellwether could not survive without them. Claire understood it. Thomas respected the orchard too much to pretend skill lived in only one set of hands. "We don't have to make one giant decision tonight," Claire said. "Reggie can keep taking repair calls. Tomas can quote pruning. Alma can consult. Howard can haul if somebody needs hauling. We share customers and schedules when it helps." "And when it does not help?" Vanessa asked. "We say no." "Who is we?" The room quieted. Alma sat at the head of the long table, the place Dean had occupied in Ruth's dining room. She noticed and moved her chair sideways, opening the end. "Anyone who works through this table sees the rates," she said. "We choose shared jobs here. Nobody owns another person's hours." "Claire gets 10%, Reggie said. "Claire gets paid for work," Alma corrected, "not for owning the telephone." "The telephone has value," Joe said from the doorway. Nobody had heard her arrive. She held 2 pies and wore a red rooster apron beneath her coat. "You invited Joe?" Claire asked. "No," Joe said. "You left with my good serving spoon." She set the pies on the stove and surveyed the crowded room. "Whatever this is, get a second telephone. Farmers believe voicemail is a form of disrespect." Howard raised his hand slightly. "I have a spare line in my garage." "Of course you do," Reggie said. By midnight, they had named nothing and solved less than half of what they argued about. They agreed on one practical thing. 5% from shared jobs would cover the cottage phone, paper, heat during meetings, and Claire's scheduling time. More complicated jobs could include a separate administrative fee everyone saw in advance. Claire objected that 5% was too little. Thomas said, "Good, now you understand our bonus." She erased 3 pages of neat columns and started again. The name came 2 weeks later when Della asked what to write on a check. "Long Table Orchard Services," Alma said. Claire looked up from the phone. "When did we vote?" "We didn't. Della is waiting." "That's not democracy. That's Tuesday." Della wrote the check. The name stayed. Winter gave them pruning work, machinery repairs, and fewer hours than anyone needed. Thomas estimated jobs by block and difficulty, refusing price per tree requests from growers whose trees had not been touched in 6 years. Reggie winterized pumps, rebuilt 2 sprayers, and developed a profitable sideline repairing heaters in migrant housing. Alma reorganized a small storage operation, whose owner had been losing pears because he stacked warm fruit too quickly. Howard hauled equipment twice, then discovered his truck insurance cost more than the jobs paid. He withdrew from hauling shared loads, but continued bringing workers to pruning sites for mileage. Vanessa asked Alma to train her in grading. Alma charged her $1. "If I charge nothing, you think it is kindness," she said. "It is work." Claire put the dollar in the ledger. Not everything held. Marta took a 3-week pruning contract, hated the cold, and returned to Bellwether's packing line when Dean offered winter sorting work. One grower delayed a large payment for 6 weeks, leaving Tomas unable to pay 2 people on time. Claire broke the rule and used her diner savings to cover part of it. Alma found out. You own 3 trucks now? She asked. It wasn't their fault. It was not yours either. They needed to be paid. Yes. From the customer. He kept saying, Friday. Then on Friday, we stopped believing him. Claire sat at the table while Alma called the grower. Alma did not threaten, plead, or explain. She said the next scheduled crew would not arrive until the outstanding invoice was paid. The money appeared that afternoon. Claire put her savings back, chastened and relieved. You cannot build this by becoming everybody's emergency, Alma said. I'm good in emergencies. That is why you keep finding them. The roof began leaking again during the first heavy snow. Water ran through the patched decking, down a bedroom wall, and into a dresser drawer containing the last of Ruth's clothes. Claire moved everything downstairs and called the roof contractor. The price had not improved. She sold her car for $2,800 to a man who listened to the heat shield rattle and said he could fix it in an hour. Reggie watched him drive away. He's lying, Reggie said. About fixing it? About an hour. Claire combined the money with her savings, the Apple income, and a payment plan that would keep her at the diner through summer. The cottage received a plain metal roof the color of charcoal. It was not charming. It was watertight. For 3 days, hammers struck above the long table, while Claire scheduled pruning crews beneath them. Without a car, she walked to Bellwether's main road and caught rides. Joe picked her up for diner shifts, complaining so continuously about the inconvenience that accepting help felt almost respectable. Howard drove her to job sites. Reggie took her grocery shopping and pretended every trip required a stop at the parts store. Dean saw the car disappear and the new roof appear. He came by while contractors were fastening the final ridge panel. You sold your transportation to fix a house behind my equipment shed, he said. Good afternoon. What happens when you need to get somewhere? I go. How? Usually with someone who also needs to go there. That is not independence. Claire looked past him. Reggie's truck, Howard's truck, and Joe's station wagon were parked along the road. No, she said, it isn't. The answer unsettled him more than an argument would have. Marlene hosted Christmas dinner at the farmhouse. Claire nearly refused, then Alma told her avoiding people was not the same as defeating them. The brass chandelier had been polished. Ruth's piano held evergreen branches and white candles. Marlene had rearranged the furniture, but kept Ruth's chair near the window. Claire's place card sat between Graham and Susan. You made place cards for 6 adults? Claire asked. Marlene straightened a spoon. Otherwise, Dean sits wherever he wants. Dean, already at the head of the table, ignored this. Dinner remained civil through soup and failed during roast beef. I heard you name the business, Susan said. Della named it under duress. Long table, Marlene said. That's nice. Dean cut into his meat. It's not a business. Graham took a drink of wine. Claire said, You paid Reggie's invoice. That makes him a contractor. It made us revenue. Us? Susan asked. The people taking shared jobs. Are you all partners? Marlene sounded genuinely interested. We're deciding what that means. Dean set down his knife. It means nothing until somebody is responsible when work goes wrong. Somebody is responsible, Claire said. The person doing the work. And when the customer refuses to pay, we stop working. So, Thomas told me. Claire looked at him. You hired Long Table? No. I asked Thomas about returning full-time after New Year's. And? He said no. The room changed. Claire had not known. Dean looked toward her. You did? No. Then your organization is less organized than advertised. It isn't my organization. Your house, your telephone, your ledger. My workers? She asked. Silence settled around the table. Dean looked away first. Marlene passed the potatoes. The cottage roof looks good. Everyone stared at her. What? She said. It does. After dinner, Graham found Claire in Ruth's old bedroom. Marlene had turned it into a sitting room, removing the medical bed and oxygen machine. The absence was so complete, it felt staged. Thomas really didn't tell you? He asked. No. Dad offered him a raise. That surprises me. It shouldn't. Dad knows what he's worth. Knowing and paying are different verbs. Graham leaned against the doorframe. The scanner reports got better. Because Alma forced you to fix the transfer. Because we adjusted several things. Did you restore the deductions? No. Claire turned from him. We paid exactly under the announced plan, he said. That's what you keep defending. Not that it was right, that you announced it. You think Long Table is going to avoid choices like that? No. What happens when your fair rates make a grower lose money? They choose not to hire us. And when you need the work, Claire thought of the grower who had delayed payment, of the money she had taken from savings, of Alma's voice on the phone. Then we find out whether we meant what we said. Graham looked toward the hall, where Dean and Susan were discussing orchard distributions in lowered voices. Dad thinks people will come back for harvest. Maybe they will. You don't believe that. I believe they'll go where the work makes sense. Bellwether always makes sense eventually. The phrase sounded inherited. By February, Longtable had pruning commitments from 5 neighboring orchards. By April, 2 of those growers wanted the same crews for thinning. Della reserved Alma for pear packing before blossoms opened. Reggie's repair schedule was full 3 weeks ahead. When growers began asking about harvest, Claire put a large paper calendar on the cottage wall. They did not fill Bellwether's dates first. They filled jobs in the order deposits arrived, prioritizing growers who had paid on time and accepted the posted rates. Bellwether sent availability forms through the crew in June. Most returned unsigned. Dean came to the cottage holding the stack. Thomas, Alma, Vanessa, Howard, and Claire were seated around the long table assigning August crews. He placed the forms in the center. "What is this?" he asked. Alma looked at them. "Those are people you used to schedule?" she said. Dean's face reddened. "They work for Bellwether." "They worked for Bellwether," Alma replied. "That is different." Dean stared at Alma, as if she had spoken in another language. "Tomas is my crew lead," he said. Tomas folded his hands on the table. "I told you after Christmas. You said you wouldn't return full time." "Yes." "You didn't say you were taking half the crew?" "I did not take anyone." Dean slapped the unsigned forms against his palm. "Then, what do you call this?" "People reading a schedule." Claire could see the paper calendar behind him. August and September were crowded with colored blocks. Della Pike's pears, Sanderson's early apples, 2 small farms west of the river, and a thinning follow-up that had become a harvest contract. Names appeared beneath each job in pencil because people could still change their availability. Bellwether appeared nowhere. Dean turned to Claire. "Did you deliberately leave us off?" "You didn't request a crew. I employ a crew. Those forms ask individuals to return under the compensation plan they already rejected." "Rejected?" "Most of them worked the full season. They finished the work they promised. That's called employment." Alma leaned back. "Employment does not mean next year belongs to you." Dean set the forms on the table. "What are your rates?" Claire pointed to the board near the phone. Longtable's picking rates were listed by crop and terrain, with separate charges for transportation and crew coordination. Quality adjustments required inspection with the crew lead present. Nobody's base pay could be reduced because of another worker's damage. Dean read silently. "That's 20% above ours." "Before or after deductions?" Vanessa asked. "Your deductions were based on damage. Some damage." Dean ignored the distinction. "Bellwether can match the base rate." "Will Bellwether use these terms?" Alma asked. "I'm not submitting a bid to my own employees. Then you are not matching." He looked around the table, searching faces he knew. Howard studied the calendar. Vanessa held her pencil across both palms. Thomas met Dean's gaze without triumph. Marta was not there. She had signed Bellwether's form and would return. Others had too. Longtable had not emptied the orchard. It had merely made staying a choice. That seemed to offend Dean more. He turned back to Claire. Outside, "No, Claire. This is the meeting. It's my family's business." So was the reserve distribution. The room became still. Dean's expression changed as though she had struck him in front of witnesses. Claire had imagined saying something like that for months. In imagination, it felt clean. In the cottage, with Thomas looking down and Alma's hand resting near the ledger, it tasted small. Dean nodded slowly. "There it is." "What?" "This is revenge." "Part of it might be." Thomas looked up. Claire forced herself to continue. "Part of me is glad you have to ask people instead of assuming. That's why the rates are on the wall and the jobs are decided at this table. So, the worst part of me doesn't get to run it." Nobody moved. Dean glanced at the calendar again. "What would it take?" he asked. "To do what? Put Bellwether on there. A deposit. Agreed terms. Open dates. You have dates. We have some. Not the ones you want. You're prioritizing orchards a quarter our size. We're prioritizing people who called first. That is not how harvest works. It is how ours works. Dean gathered the forms. At the door, he stopped beside the yellow kettle. Ruth had left a faint burn mark on its wooden handle years earlier. She would hate this, he said. Claire did not ask whether he meant the business, the conflict, or having to stand in the workers' cottage and request labor. Maybe, she said. The answer denied them both the comfort of claiming Ruth. Dean left, without adding bellwether to the calendar. Ginger gold ripened first at Sanderson's. Long Table sent 12 pickers, Howard's truck, and Vanessa as crew lead. Claire arrived before sunrise carrying coffee and a folder of job sheets. She spent the first hour discovering that Sanderson had counted ladders, but not inspected them. 2 had cracked rungs. "We can work around them," he said. "No," Vanessa replied. "They held last year. Then they can retire proud." Sanderson complained about buying replacements until Claire showed him the clause he had signed. He drove to the supply store, muttering. The crew began late and finished the block ahead of schedule anyway. At Della's, pears came off without the black marks that had spoiled the previous crop. Alma adjusted wash temperature before the first bin entered. Della walked beside the line, searching for something to criticize, then found a loose label and appeared relieved. Long Table's first full harvest week produced more money than all their winter jobs combined. It also produced chaos. A picker went to the wrong orchard because Claire had written Pike beside 2 different addresses. Reggie's truck broke down while hauling tools. Howard accepted a bin-moving job without telling anyone the customer's access road could not handle his trailer. Claire worked 4 diner shifts, slept in pieces, and answered the cottage phone while brushing her teeth. At supper, Alma found her writing invoices with her eyes closed. "You are not good enough to do that asleep," Alma said. "I'm resting one side of my brain. You have one side." Reggie took the pen from Claire's hand. "Go upstairs. I need to finish Sanderson. Sanderson can wait until morning. He pays on receipt. Then he can practice patience." Claire woke 10 hours later to discover that Vanessa had finished the invoices, incorrectly added 2 mileage charges, corrected them, and left a note saying bookkeeping was punishment for unknown sins. Bellwether began gala 2 weeks behind the neighboring orchards. Graham had scheduled picking by the projected maturity dates in his software, but the south-facing blocks had advanced during a run of hot nights. Thomas noticed while driving past and said nothing until Claire asked why he kept looking toward the hill. "Fruit is ready," he said. "Dean has crews. He has people. Crews take time." Bellwether's returning workers were spread among new hires, most of whom had never picked high-density apple trees. Marta led one group. 2 temporary supervisors led the others. They moved quickly, but fruit arrived at the packing house with stem punctures, finger bruises, and leaves packed into the bins. The scanner rejected more than expected. Without Reggie, a worn roller remained slightly out of alignment. It did not stop the line. It only turned apples at the wrong moment, marking one side before they reached the camera. The machine identified the marks and rejected the fruit exactly as designed. Graham called Reggie. "I can come Thursday," Reggie said. "It's Monday." "Correct. We're losing premium grade. I'm repairing Della's lift today and Sanderson's pump tomorrow. We'll pay emergency rate." Thursday is emergency rate. Graham called another mechanic. The man adjusted the scanner lighting instead of the roller. Rejections fell for half a day because the camera stopped seeing some marks. The buyer saw them later. 3 truckloads were downgraded. Susan came to the cottage on Friday, while Claire and Vanessa assigned crews for the following week. She waited on the porch until Vanessa left, then entered without removing her sunglasses. "Dean says you refused Bellwether. He never agreed to the terms. He says you wanted a deposit from your own family. Della paid one. Della isn't your uncle." "Exactly." Susan removed the glasses. Her eyes looked swollen. "The first distribution this year is delayed." Claire said nothing. 2 loads were downgraded. "I heard." "Of course you heard. People talk. People come here and talk." "Yes." Susan moved to the window. The 4 old trees were heavy with late fruit, their branches supported by props Thomas had cut from scrap wood. "Are you happy?" she asked. "No. You sound surprised." "I thought I might be." Susan turned. Claire looked at the calendar, at the jobs already promised. "I wanted Dean to understand that the orchard doesn't work because he owns it. And now apples are getting ruined. People did work for those. So, help. We're booked. You could move something. To where? Later. Fruit doesn't care that you're family." Susan flinched. Claire wished the sentence back. She could not keep turning every truth into a weapon and pretending only accuracy mattered. "I'm sorry," she said. "No, you're right." Susan put on her sunglasses again. "That's what makes this so frightening." At the door, she paused. "I took the distribution because I wanted never to need them again," she said. "Now I need the orchard to need them for me." She left before Claire could answer. Long Table reached the old russets in late September. The crop was still small by commercial standards, but larger than the previous year. Claire, Thomas, and Alma picked the fruit themselves after the day's contracted work. The northern spies were crisp and tart. The Baldwins glowed dull red beneath their bloom. The Roxbury russets remained defiantly rough. Joe bought 6 bushels for the diner at the same price she paid her distributor. "You don't get a sympathy premium," she told Claire. "I didn't ask for one. You were thinking loudly." They turned bruised fruit into preserves and cider syrup. Whole apples went into pies. Claire printed plain labels bearing the 4 varieties and the words, "Long Table," tended by the people who picked them. She listed every name. The entire crop earned less than 1 bellwether truckload. It paid the cottage's winter heating bill, replenished the scheduling fund, and allowed Claire to reduce another diner shift. She held the first jar beneath the kitchen light. The syrup was dark as polished wood. Thomas looked at it. 4 trees are not an orchard. No, but they covered propane. He nodded. Better than promises. Bellwether's main crop worsened. A cooling room sensor began reading 4 degrees colder than the actual temperature. Reggie had calibrated it each season by comparing it with a hanging thermometer near the rear wall. Nobody performed the comparison. Fruit at the back softened faster than Graham's storage schedule predicted. When the problem was found, Marlene's event staff were pulled into sorting. Graham canceled 2 wedding tours. Dean hired day labor at rates higher than Long Table's base rate and still lacked experienced crew leads. Then the weather forecast shifted. 3 days of hard rain were expected, followed by wind. Thousands of late apples remained on the trees. Once the ground softened, ladders would become dangerous. Once the wind arrived, fruit would fall. Every Long Table crew was committed through the first day of rain. Dean came to the cottage after dark. Claire was alone at the table, moving names across the calendar in search of hours that did not exist. He entered without knocking and placed an apple in front of her. It had a deep bruise along one side. He did not sit. "How much?" he asked. "For what? Everything you demanded? Deposit, rates, Alma on packing, Reggie on equipment. How much to get people into my orchard tomorrow?" "We can't tomorrow?" His face emptied. Then the next day. "The rain starts." "I know when the rain starts." "Dean," he gripped the back of a chair. "I am not asking as your uncle," he said. "I am asking as a grower whose fruit is about to hit the ground." Claire looked at the crowded calendar. For the first time since Ruth's will was read, Dean was offering her exactly what she had wanted. The terrible part was that she no longer had the power to answer him alone. Claire reached for the phone. Dean straightened. "Who are you calling?" "Alma first. I need pickers, not a committee. Then you came to the wrong house." His hand tightened on the chair. Claire expected him to leave. Instead, he pulled it out and sat. Alma arrived in 12 minutes, wearing slippers inside rubber boots. Thomas followed in his work clothes. Reggie came from a pump repair with grease to his elbows. Vanessa and Howard joined by speakerphone because they were staying near a job west of the river. Dean watched them gather around Ruth's table. Claire described the fruit, the forecast, and Bellwether's request without calling it Dean's. She listed every job already on the calendar. Della's pears had to finish before rain. Sanderson's late block needed 6 people. A small hillside orchard had paid a deposit for 12 pickers and had no other crew. "We do not move them," Tomas said. "No," Claire agreed. Dean leaned forward. "I'll pay the deposits they lose." "It's not about deposits," Alma said. "Their fruit falls too." "What is available?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. Claire found a blank sheet and began writing names. 4 workers had completed their current contracts. 3 could come after noon. Vanessa's crew might finish the hillside block by midday if the ground stayed firm. Thomas would not promise that until he saw the trees. Howard could transport people between sites, but only if Bellwether provided a second truck for ladders. 6 tomorrow morning, Claire said. Maybe 13 after lunch. More the second day if earlier commitments finish. That's not enough. It's what exists. I can add the temporary crews. Alma shook her head. Not on ladders in hard rain. They've been picking all month. Badly. Dean looked at her. Then train them. Training is not shouting faster. Reggie wiped his hands on a rag. Cooling rooms need checking before more fruit goes in. We fixed the sensor. You changed it. Nobody checked the temperature difference across the room. Dean drew a breath through his nose. Claire turned the paper over and wrote terms. Long table rates, she said. Emergency scheduling charge, deposit tonight. Fine. Alma controls packing and can slow or stop the line. Dean's answer came more slowly. With Graham operating under her packing decisions. No. Alma stood. Good night. Sit down. You do not tell me where to sit anymore. Dean looked at Claire as if she had designed the sentence. Claire kept her voice level. You said everything I demanded. That wasn't one of my demands. It's hers. Graham arrived while Dean was still staring at Alma. He entered carrying a laptop and a printed block map, took one look around the table, and pulled up a chair without being asked. Dad called, he said. I mapped the highest value fruit and the blocks most exposed to wind. Thomas studied the map. This one first. Graham pointed elsewhere. Honeycrisp is worth more. This slope holds water. Ladders cannot go there after 6 hours of rain. The hourly forecast gives us 8. The hourly forecast does not pick apples. Graham moved the mark to Thomas's block. Dean noticed. So did everyone else. Alma has packing authority, Graham said. Dean turned. You work for me. Yes. And you're giving away my line? I'm trying not to put damaged fruit into rooms we can't cool. Alma sat again. Claire wrote it down. Reggie can stop unsafe equipment, she said. He could always stop unsafe equipment, Dean replied. Reggie laughed once. Write it anyway. Claire did. The old quality deductions, Alma said. Dean's face closed. No, they were wrong. We adjusted the system. You kept the money. We paid under the plan. Thomas pushed back from the table. Then there is no agreement. Dean looked around as if searching for the person who would admit this was theater. No one did. How much? He asked. Graham opened the laptop. Last season, all quality deductions connected to the transfer damage. That's not possible to isolate perfectly. Alma said, all 3 crews. Graham typed for a moment. The amount appeared on his screen. He turned it toward Dean. $31,860. Dean stared. That is payroll we already closed. It is profit you kept, Claire said. He looked at her with open anger. She almost softened the words. Then she remembered Susan's $5,000 check on the table and the price of a roof that did not leak. Dean looked at the calendar. If I agree, you guarantee the harvest. No, Claire said. Then what am I paying for? Work, not weather. I could lose the crop and pay twice. Yes. That's insane. Della Pike's voice came from the open phone on the table. It's farming, she said. Claire had forgotten Alma called her to ask about releasing 2 workers after pairs. Dean looked toward the phone. Della continued. You can borrow Raoul and Beth from me after noon if my East rows are finished. You send them back if we're not done. Why are you helping? Dean asked. Because fruit on the ground makes everybody stupid next year. She hung up. The cottage settled around the low hum of the refrigerator. Rain began ticking against the metal roof, light at first. Dean put both hands flat on the table. Restore the deductions, he told Graham, not as an admission that the whole plan was wrong. Alma looked at Claire. Do not write that part. Graham closed the laptop. We'll process it. Deposit tonight, Claire said. Dean gave her a bitter smile. You really are Ruth's granddaughter. No, Claire said. She would have taken cash. Thomas laughed so suddenly that Dean did too. It lasted only a second, but the room changed. They worked until dawn, assigning crews, checking ladders, and arranging trucks. Claire called every grower affected. Nobody was asked to surrender a promised crew. 2 volunteered to release workers early if their blocks finished. 1 refused, apologetically. Claire thanked him and left his names on the calendar. Bellwether's deposit entered Long Table's account at 2:14 in the morning. The rain strengthened at sunrise. 6 pickers began in Bellwether's Upper York block, where the ground remained firm. Thomas went with Sanderson's crew, promising nothing about when he could leave. Claire rode with Howard between orchards, carrying dry gloves, food, and revised schedules sealed in plastic bags. Bellwether looked different from the passenger seat. Water silvered the grass lanes. Temporary crews moved beneath yellow rain gear. Apples shone against dark leaves, beautiful from a distance and dangerously slick up close. Dean stood at the end of a row checking bins. He wore no hood. Claire handed him the schedule. "Where's Alma?" "Packing house." "Graham says she stopped the line. She found soft fruit entering cold storage. We don't have time to stop. We don't have room to store rot." Dean crumpled the edge of the plastic sleeve, then released it. "Fine." Claire waited for him to add something. He pointed toward the next row. "Ladder 3 has a loose foot. Take it out." She marked it. By noon, Sanderson's block remained unfinished. Della released 2 workers. Vanessa's hillside crew finished early, but the access road turned to mud and their van got stuck. Howard pulled it free while Claire moved the afternoon bellwether names back an hour. Every delay cost fruit. The wind began before the forecast said it would. Apples struck the wet ground with soft, heavy thumps. At bellwether, Dean's new pickers rushed. One ladder slipped sideways. The picker jumped clear, shaken but unhurt. Thomas arrived minutes later with 7 workers and took over the slope without discussion. 3 points, he told them. Every ladder, nobody reaches. Move it. Dean tried to redirect 2 people toward Honeycrisp. Thomas said, "No." For one terrible moment, Claire thought Dean would fight him in the rain. Then Dean picked up a ladder himself and followed Thomas's crew. Inside the packing house, Alma reduced the line speed by 15%. Graham objected until she cut open 3 bruised apples and showed him flesh already browning beneath the unbroken skin. "Slow fruit packs faster than rejected fruit," she said. He changed the setting. Reggie found the cooling room fans cycling unevenly. One motor overheated under continuous load. He shut it down. Dean came inside, soaked through. "We need that room. You need it not to burn." "How long?" 2 hours if you leave me alone. Longer if you ask again." Dean turned away without asking again. Marlene canceled a wedding tour and brought the event staff into the sorting area. She wore rubber gloves over her manicure and separated ground falls from storage fruit. Susan arrived in old jeans and stood beside her. Claire saw her mother lift an apple, inspect the bruise, and place it in the cider bin. Susan's movements were clumsy at first. Alma corrected her twice. The third time, Susan caught the defect herself. Nobody discussed the distribution. For 36 hours, the orchard became work rather than property. Crews moved from the safest ground outward. Howard hauled bins. Vanessa tracked names and hours. Claire coordinated meals from the Red Rooster, after Joe declared chain restaurant biscuits an agricultural hazard. Graham abandoned the projection software and walked blocks with Thomas. Dean picked until his left hand cramped around the bag strap. They did not save everything. The storm stripped one exposed block before the crew reached it. 200 bins of fruit were collected as cider grade instead of premium. Several rows became inaccessible when the lanes softened. A truck missed its loading window. The wholesale buyer reduced the order after inspecting earlier bruised loads. On the second evening, Claire stood beneath the awning behind the packing house, watching apples roll into a cider trailer. Dean joined her. Mud covered him to the thighs. His face looked 10 years older. "How much is still out there?" she asked. "Enough to hurt. Graham thinks the North Block can wait until morning." "He's right." It was the first time Claire had heard Dean say those words without qualification. Rain drummed on the metal awning. "I thought you wanted this," he said. "The storm? To watch us lose money." Claire considered lying. "I wanted you to lose the certainty of it." He looked at her. "The certainty that profits belong to you because your name was on the right page," she said. "The certainty that people would always come back no matter what you took away." Dean watched the cider fruit tumble. "And now, I want the work to count." He rubbed the scar across his thumb. "I started in that cottage," he said. "Your grandfather put me at the table and made Thomas's father correct my pruning." "I know. I thought leaving that table meant I'd learned enough." Claire looked through the open packing house doors. Alma stood at the controls. Graham carried boxes. Susan and Marlene sorted fruit beside workers whose pay had just been restored. "Maybe it meant you stopped listening." Dean nodded once. Not agreement, not apology. But he did not defend himself. The rain eased after midnight. By morning, Bellwether's trees held only the fruit the crews had deliberately left. Long Table had saved the harvest from the total failure. It had not saved the family's profit. In the cottage kitchen, Claire entered the final hours into the ledger. The emergency rates, restored deductions, downgraded loads, and lost premium crop all sat in separate columns. Dean came in carrying Ruth's old cash box from the farmhouse. He placed it on the table. "Marlene found this in the pantry," he said. "It belongs here." Claire rested her hand on the dented lid, but did not open it. Dean looked at the crowded calendar, the paid invoices, and the names written beneath long table. "The event expansion is off," he said. "For this year, for as long as the cottage is standing." Then he waited, as if he understood that what came next could not be settled by leaving something valuable on her table. Claire waited too. Dean's gaze settled on the cash box. The red paint had worn away at the corners, exposing dull metal. A strip of masking tape crossed the lid, Ruth written on it in faded blue ink. "She kept lunch money in that," he said. "I remember. Before that, she kept payroll." "I don't remember. No, you wouldn't." He placed both hands on the back of the chair, but did not sit. "I knew what you did for her," he said. Claire kept her hand on the box. "I told myself caring for Ruth was personal," he continued. "The orchard was business. You chose to come home, and we were running the place. So what you gave didn't belong in the same accounting. That was convenient." "Yes." He did not soften it. "When the reserve came up, I knew how it would look. I knew what Susan would choose. Marlene, too. I also knew you had no vote." He glanced toward the roof. "Then Ruth left you this, and I treated it like proof that the rest was fair. You offered me $20,000 before I had running water. I know. You thought I'd need it badly enough to say yes. Yes. The second admission hurt worse than the first, because it removed the possibility that Dean had merely been careless." Claire opened the cash box. Inside lay a roll of paper meal tickets, 3 carpenter's pencils, an old church key bottle opener, and a paring knife with a wooden handle polished pale by use. No money, no final message from Ruth. Just the small tools of a room where people once ate. Dean looked into it. "I was wrong," he said. "About the cottage?" "About what counted." Claire closed the lid. An apology could not rebuild the years in which her labor had been described as free housing. It could not return the choice Susan had made or change Ruth's will. It did not transform Dean into a different man. But it was specific. It cost him something to say. "I don't forgive you yet," Claire said. His mouth pulled tight. "Fair." "I'm not sure I want to." "Also fair." "You don't get to call everything fair now." A faint, exhausted smile touched his face. Noted, he moved toward the door, then stopped. "Bellwether will pay Long Table's invoice Friday. The restored deductions will be separate checks. Alma will verify them. I assume she would." "And next season?" Dean looked back at the calendar. "We submit a request," he said. It was not surrender. It was better. It was learning the procedure everyone else followed. After he left, Claire moved the cash box to the end of the long table. Reggie arrived first, opened it without permission, and examined the bottle opener. "Antique equipment," he said. "Still operational." He tested it on a root beer. Alma counted the meal tickets. Thomas sharpened the paring knife on the back step and returned it to the box. By supper, Long Table's petty cash occupied one corner, along with stamps, spare keys, and 2 pencils nobody was allowed to remove because Reggie had already lost 4. Bellwether paid Friday. The quality checks went to everyone affected by the previous year's deductions, including workers who had not joined Long Table. Alma stood in the packing house while Graham handed them out. She checked each amount against her notes. Marta received hers last. "You leaving too?" Graham asked. "No," she said, "but now staying is more expensive." Graham almost laughed. Then he saw she was serious and wrote something on his clipboard. The family received no fall distribution. Downgraded fruit, emergency labor, restored pay, repairs, and the lost wholesale order consumed what would have been profit. The event barn remained open, but Marlene postponed the parking expansion and returned deposits for 2 dates that would have required construction near the cottage. She did not complain to Claire. Instead, she brought over the galvanized tubs. "You said they were awful," Claire reminded her. "They are. People like them." They set the tubs beneath the porch for ice and bottled drinks. Marlene also returned 12 mismatched chairs from the farmhouse storage room. "These belong to the Long Table," she said. "Did Ruth tell you that?" "No." "I have eyes." She looked through the kitchen doorway. Reggie's schedule covered one wall. Harvest invoices sat in stacked trays. The yellow kettle steamed on the stove. Mother would have liked the noise, Marlene said. Dean thought she'd hate this. Dean thought Mother liked being agreed with, didn't she? Of course. She just liked arguing more. Marlene touched the scarf at her throat. I'm sorry I called the cottage sentimental. It was sentimental. I meant worthless. Claire looked at her. Marlene adjusted one of the chairs until all four legs stood firmly. I was wrong, she said. The words sounded different in Marlene's voice, less like a confession than a correction she resented having delayed. Claire accepted them and the spirit offered. Susan waited longer. She came after the first freeze, carrying no check and no groceries. Claire was processing Long Table's final harvest payments at the kitchen table. The new metal roof clicked softly as the afternoon warmed it. Am I interrupting? Susan asked. Yes, I can come back. Claire nearly let her leave. Instead, she closed the ledger. What do you need? Susan removed her coat. The camel-colored purse was gone. She carried Ruth's old cloth shopping bag, folded empty beneath her arm. I don't need anything. That's new. I deserve that. Claire pulled out a chair. Susan sat across from her. For a while, they listened to Reggie arguing on the porch with someone who wanted a pump repaired before deciding whether to pay the previous invoice. The fall distribution was canceled, Susan said. I heard. I'm not here to ask you to fix it. Good. I thought you'd be pleased. I thought so too. Are you? Claire considered the stack of bellwether checks that had passed through Alma's hands, the fruit on the ground, Dean picking in the rain. I'm pleased the workers got their money. Susan nodded. I kept thinking about the 5,000, she said. What I was asking you to call it. Help. I wanted to give you enough that I could feel generous, but not admit any of the money should have been yours. Claire looked down. I knew exactly how it would feel when we divided the reserve, Susan continued. You asked me to say that, and I wouldn't. I thought if I agreed with you, Dean would see me as ungrateful. Marlene, too. I had spent so long being the one who needed something that I couldn't bear to risk the first money that felt like mine. So, you let me be ungrateful for both of us. Yes. Susan's eyes filled, but she did not look away. I was afraid if I sat beside you at that table, there wouldn't be a chair for me with them. Claire glanced at the mismatched chairs Marlene had returned. You could have brought your own. A wet laugh escaped Susan. I should have. You should have sat beside me. I know. There was no money in the apology, no offer Claire had to refuse in order to preserve herself. Only the thing she had asked for at the beginning, delivered after it could no longer purchase silence. Claire reached for the ledger and turned it around. I need someone to check mileage totals. Susan wiped beneath her eyes. Now? You said I was interrupting. That too. Susan pulled the ledger closer. She found 3 addition errors and stayed for soup. Long Table did not become an empire. It became busy. Winter repair calls kept Reggie employed more weeks than he expected. Thomas formed 2 pruning crews, then dissolved one, when a crew lead accepted more acreage than they could finish properly. Alma taught Vanessa to evaluate packing lines and made her charge more than $1. Howard found that transporting people paid better than hauling bins and built his schedule around the routes he already drove. Claire reduced her diner work to 3 nights, then added a 4th when 2 orchard customers paid late in the same month. Joe said this proved agriculture was a religion based on panic. The cottage consumed money as faithfully as ever. The chimney needed lining. A bedroom window cracked during a storm. The refrigerator finally stopped humming and simply became warm. They argued at the long table about replacing it. Business expense, Reggie said. You keep your lunch in it, Claire replied. Business lunch. You ate half a pie at midnight. Night shift. They bought a used commercial refrigerator from a church kitchen and spent more moving it than the refrigerator cost. Bellwether submitted its next pruning request in writing. Thomas accepted 1 block and declined 2 because Long Table had earlier commitments. Dean did not call Claire to overrule the decision. For thinning, Bellwether agreed to posted rates and paid its deposit on time. Graham brought the proposed compensation plan to the cottage before announcing it. He set the pages in front of Alma. No collective quality deductions, he said. Good. Crew leads, inspect rejected fruit with packing. Good. Performance rate after the 4th bin. Bad. Why? Same reason as last time. Graham pulled out a chair. Explain it again. Alma did. He stayed until she finished. Reggie returned to Bellwether only as a contractor. He charged for diagnostic time, including the minutes he spent staring resentfully at machinery. Dean paid the invoices without comment. Once, Claire found Reggie carrying Bellwether keys. You said you left those twice. Temporary set. Going back? No. Miss it? He looked toward the equipment shed. Sometimes. Loyalty, Claire learned, did not disappear when employment ended. Neither did disappointment. People could love an orchard and refuse to be owned by it. The 4 old trees bloomed heavily the following spring. Claire and Thomas thinned them until the ground was dotted with hard green fruit. Feels wasteful, she said. Still? Probably always. Good. Means you pay attention. That fall, the Northern Spy produced enough for Joe's pies and 3 restaurant orders. The Roxbury russet remained ugly and sold out first. Claire printed new labels for preserves and cider syrup. Long table orchard services appeared at the top. Beneath it, in smaller type, were the names of the people who pruned, picked, packed, cooked, scheduled, repaired, and hauled. Claire included her own. She stared at it before applying the first label. For years, she had known how to list what everyone else contributed. Writing her own name felt almost dishonest. Alma took the jar, smoothed the label with her thumb, and put it into a crate. Do not start being foolish now, she said. The harvest supper filled the cottage beyond reason. Tables extended from the kitchen into the front room. Marlene's galvanized tubs held drinks on the porch. Della brought pear cake and criticized the serving knife. Joe arrived with pies and immediately took command of the stove. Reggie lost the bottle opener from the cash box, found it in his pocket, and blamed Thomas. Dean came carrying 2 cases of Bellwether cider. Graham followed with a packing house chair because he did not trust Marlene's count. Susan arrived last. She paused in the doorway, looking for the place cards that did not exist. Claire saw the old fear cross her face, the habit of measuring which side of the room was safe. Then Susan took the empty chair beside Claire. Dean sat across from Thomas. Marlene passed potatoes to Alma. Graham asked Vanessa about a grading problem and listened through the entire answer. Nobody pretended the past had become harmless. Dean still disliked Long Table's emergency rates. Susan still needed the orchard income. Marlene still wanted more parking. Claire still heard rain in her sleep sometimes and woke expecting a pot to be filling on the floor. But the roof held. Conversation rose around the scarred wood. Every groove remained. Every burn and knife mark caught the light. Claire looked through the open kitchen window at the 4 old trees, their branches finally relieved of fruit. Beyond them, Bellwether's rows climbed the dark hill, still owned by the family, still worked by people whose names now appeared on contracts, checks, schedules, and jars. Ruth had left Claire a place nobody else wanted. The people at the table had made it somewhere worth choosing. When Susan reached for the bread, Claire moved the basket closer and made room.